Good evening to the Millbrae City Council Special Council Meeting today of December 8th, 2021. City Clerk, if you could please do roll call.
Councilmember Holliber,
Present.
Councilmember Fung,
Here.
Councilmember Pappen,
Here.
Vice Mayor Oliva, Vice Mayor Oliva.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Schneider.
Present.
All members of the City Council are present.
Thank you. And if you could all please join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We, in tonight's posted special agenda, we have the city manager to give us a quick overview, but what we left off were for public comment for items not on the agenda. We need to do that, but that'll be right after the city manager gives us his quick staff report.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Again, good evening to you. Good evening to the members of the City Council and the community. Tom Williams, City Manager. The primary purpose of tonight's special meeting was to continue with the dialogue and public hearing for the transition to City Council districts. But with that, we've added a couple of items, and I'll go through that very quickly now. So on the consent calendar, we have two items, starting with item number 1, and that's consider adoption of the calendar year 2022 Cultural Arts Advisory Committee Work Plan. Item number 2 on consent is a resolution approving the revised sewer management plan. It says revised, but this is a 5-year update of a plan. There is no substantive policy changes or anything to this system management plan. Then we have our public hearing item, and that is item number 3, and that is transition to district-based elections for council members. This is our public hearing number 3. We're required a minimum of 2, which over the past month, the City Council has conducted those. So this is public hearing number 3 in addition to the first 2. Then we move to new business. Item number 4 is to consider directing staff to draft an urgency ordinance related to SB 9. And the mayor, then adjournment. So that provides an overview of tonight's agenda.
Thank you, City Manager. So to the public, 2 minutes for items not on tonight's agenda. And this is a special council meeting where we've got some long items. So please be brief. If you could raise your hands or let the city clerk know that you're on the phone.
There is no general public comment on the agenda tonight.
I understand, but when we did an agenda overview earlier today, but as I'm looking, I'm not seeing any hands raised. City Clerk, anybody on the phone? Okay, we will close public comment for items not on the agenda. Moving to consent calendar, there are 2 items on consent calendar. I heard someone might want to pull one off. Is that still the case? I will, for consent calendar on the adoption of the Culture Arts Advisory Committee, I know we've got Chair Amy Lauer there, and we have staff ready for a presentation if you would like it. Vice Mayor Oliva.
Yeah, well, since we're in such a hurry with everything, would it be appropriate to have this come back at a later date so we can have a proper presentation?
Well, it was supposed to be on the meeting just before Thanksgiving. The reason it is on tonight's agenda is a unique outside funding for a mural that needs to come back to City Council in January. So approving their work plan tonight means that they can go forward working on that project with Skyline College. That's why it's on the agenda tonight.
And Mayor, I did have a couple questions on that funding, and I really didn't want to get into details tonight, but as far as the funding goes, it's 15,000 and we don't know. Are we pulling this? Are we going to have discussion now? What do you want to do?
Why don't we pull it from the agenda? Amy's ready for a presentation. The 15,000 is actually for the mural at the Recreation Center and is already in part of the Rec Center plans. This is a mural that came to our attention the beginning of just about 2 weeks ago.
Mayor, is it 15,000 from the 3 different people? Is it the city's 15,000? Is it the Lions Club? Is it the foundations?
Let's do that one that comes up at being pulled off consent calendar. Good questions.
I was hoping that we could just didn't have to rush through this and do this right.
We don't have to rush through it. I had heard a different council member wanted to pull it. And I'm telling you, the reason it's going to stay on today's agenda is because of Professor Asfahani getting a president's grant to do a mural in Millbrae. And he would like to do it here in Millbrae. So that's why it's on tonight's agenda. So we'll pull it off consent calendar. And then your questions are very valid, Vice Mayor. Okay, so consent calendar number 1 is off. Is there a motion and second for second agenda item, which is the revised sewer system management plan?
So moved, Oliva.
Thank
Happen
you, Vice Mayor.
second.
Thank you, Councilman Pappen. Any discussion? Okay, City Clerk, could you call the vote, please?
Councilmember Oliver,
Aye.
Councilmember Fung,
Aye.
Councilmember Pappen,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Oliva,
Aye.
Mayor Schneider.
Aye.
The city council approves consent item number 2 by a vote 5-0.
Thank you, City Clerk. Okay, bringing agenda item number 1,
It's really
City
good to work.
Manager, do we have a staff presentation? Staff and Chair Lauer's presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to introduce Ms. Mackenzie Brady, our Recreation Division Director. Department Director. Mackenzie?
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm Mackenzie Brady, Recreation Director, and tonight we'll be presenting the Millbrae Cultural Arts Advisory Committee work plan. And to present that to you, we have Chair Amy Lauer. And Amy, I will go ahead and start the presentation. And if you just want to let me know, or I can start to move the presentation forward, let me know if you need me to change anything.
That sounds great. In the interest of time, do you want me to, has everyone had this as pre-read? Should I just skip to the?
I would take, Amy, do your presentation as if you're selling it to us.
Sell it, all right. All right, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, honored to present this work plan to you. We have a new committee that's been pulled together, so some different thinking. So open to any and all of your feedback. Yeah, so we can move beyond this. I'm sure you'll be meeting the other council members soon enough. Last year was an interesting year, as we all know, and I think that we should be very proud of the work that mostly the outgoing members of the committee accomplished. One of the biggest was the second pivot to virtual for the Spring Art Show, which engaged the community and I think brought a lot of joy to the people who participated, whether they were artists or they viewed the art digitally or they knew one of the artists. There was also video showcase and interview of the artists. So it was really a very warming, community enhancing set of activities. Also, there's the skate park mural project, which many of you have seen and know. This really brightens up that whole area, whether you're driving up or down Millbrae Avenue and just taking a look, or you're in the skate park and walking up, or you're moving to the area with the new workout place. I think that at first people may have been caught off guard by the different style of this art, but it is bright and it reflects the vitality of Millbrae and the activity that goes on there. There was some support in terms of crane folding. Also, there was work done. You met the Cheryl Delacote, the artist who's working on creating the Harriet Tubman Way sculpture. So the committee actually was part of, the review process prior to you seeing that art. And then there was a Why I Want to Vote contest, but as we know, people were pretty zoomed and requested out. So unfortunately, although this is a really timely idea, it didn't really get off the ground. It's something worth repeating in different ways, I think. I think if we had done it as a little video submission, it may have done a little better, but that's hindsight. So we've landed on our vision statement. Would love your feedback. Cultivate community cohesion and enhance the quality of life in Millbrae through public art and shared cultural activities. This vision was, we did some sort of shopping around about throughout San Mateo County and beyond, how similar committees look at their work, and there really are some very consistent themes. So we tried to pull that in. So yes, this is our overarching vision. It's, I think, very positive. And the next is mission statement. So support the creation of local art and cultural activities that build community inclusion, expand pride in our city, and deliver on the city's mission statement. Activities include public art, community art creation and art shows, music, dance, film, literature, and other artistic expressions. So the three objectives, and again, this is fairly consistent with what committees of our type do to add to the goals of the city, is to enhance quality of life. A lot of this would be through visual representation, but also alluding to the other art forms. Foster economic growth and sustainability. So this could be in partnership with EVAC, local businesses, increasing the vitality of our downtown with interesting art, interactive art, things that people want to come and look at, and also cultivate understanding and cohesion of our very diverse community. So our goals, so the first one is pretty standard, advisory body to the city council. The second is, I think this is what Vice Mayor Anna Oliva was speaking to, a mural painting project concept at the new Recreation Center preschool. So the 15,000 was really a copy paste of the money that was allocated for the skate park mural. So there's no RFP, so the amount is, we haven't identified all the funds. My understanding is that it has been earmarked in the city budget, but I could be mistaken. So this really was meant to highlight joy and inclusivity and really reflect the environment that it's in. And we're very interested in having a muralist who's accustomed to working with the community to so the muralist would create the art and then would be assisted by the community in terms of the actual painting in. Also, then creating a public art plan, which it's a 3-year view, but it would include 22. And it would also include this sort of bluebird that fell through our window of a self-funded mural project by Skyline College and the art professor there. We're actually meeting with him on Friday. And then the last two, there's a idea of a tile project in many places, including the SPCA, and there are schools that do this. Often as fundraising is tiles can be created either by families where they express something that's important to them, or by an artist. And we would, of course, have city council approve on a theme, and we'd want the theme to actually come from the community. So what we really want to do is make sure we pull people in to gather their ideas. So anything we do is very reflective of the community. So we like the idea of having decorative tiles in that public gathering area by the flagpoles, sort of between the library and the Chakouti room. And then the last is to quickly figure out what makes sense in terms of an art show in 22. It's very fluid right now. I think if we did it early in the first half of the year, it would be virtual, but if we did it in the back half of the year, it could be in combination with other big things that are happening in Millbrae with buildings and other things that might be unveiled. We have some different ideas, so we just wanted to take a step back before we go forward and figure out what makes the most sense. Any questions?
And the city manager has been modifying the way each of the committees, not necessarily the commissions, but the committees are doing their work plan. So this new format with the vision, the goals, trying to put a financial amount on it was a first attempt at that. Before my time, the committees were given a budget from the city, and that sort of went away at some point in the early 2010s on that. So this is the first one. MCAC, their projects didn't have dollar amounts for it. So Culture Arts is sort of the first one to try to say, we think this is a ballpark figure of what these various activities would cost.
Yeah, Mayor, to
Thank you.
address the issue of the budget, this is not budgeted in this fiscal year, and any budget direct project related or task budget would actually come back to the city council for further consideration and review. So nothing is adopted in our current fiscal year budget. But I did, as the mayor said, instead of going blindly, at least get an estimate of if things move forward, here's what we can expect in terms of cost, time commitment, timeline, that type of thing. So everyone has an idea of what those numbers and time commitment would be.
It is my understanding that the fundraising committee for the rec center for FF&E includes not just furniture and fixtures, but it includes money for some trees and it includes money for the artwork. So then it just depends on how successful the fundraising is through that and whether people have dedicated funds for a particular activity on there. So there might be some outside funds on that, but I think what in the vice mayor's question of the Lions, to my knowledge, the Lions haven't been asked yet, but that would be one of the places it might go to try to find the money for the mural for the youth center, the certified children care center on that. So Councilwoman Pappen and Vice Mayor, did we get you? I don't want to leave. You were first up.
Yeah, I still don't, I mean, I just don't see how we're going to be voting on something that's futuristic. But I'll listen. I'm open-minded.
Okay. Councilwoman Pappen and then Councilman Holliber.
Yeah, I want to be very clear here. The city has an arts policy. This is an advisory plan. And that, and I appreciate all the work and effort that went into this, Chair Louder. But public art is something that needs to be passed through the city council and open for discussion here. I caution that, retaining an artist and presenting something after the fact without the public input or the council's review is not something that is allowed by our existing arts policy, which was an extensive and very painful policy to come up with. So this is a plan. We can accept the plan here, but I need to be very clear that this is not the acceptance of any contract or proposed art to be placed within the city. We have to be very, very clear on that because it comes to the city council, every piece of art that needs to be displayed or is recommended for display because the public has an extreme interest in what is put up and what is placed here. I know everybody has differing opinions, but the public needs an opportunity and the city council is the final say on everything. So I just,
of course, Councilwoman Pappen, I don't know if it was made available to you, the more detailed work plan that has all of the steps and the project milestones, but each project has starting points with the community and city council. There was no assumption that anything would ever move forward without weighing in on what the concepts are, who the artist is, what execution would look like. So maybe I'm missing something.
yeah, I just want to be clear here. We just, by the time it reaches the council, it seems to be a done deal. And that's what seems to be of concern.
I'm sorry, what is a done deal?
The presentation of the artwork, the Harriet Tubman example, for one.
I
Okay.
didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's basically almost a done deal by the time it reaches us. So,
Oh, well, that's not how I laid out my work plan.
but no, and I appreciate your work plan. I've got no problem with the work plan. I'm just trying to be clear with how things are presented here, because it seems like we are now ready to contract with someone from Skyline.
No.
Well, that's what was mentioned.
Okay, the Skyline project, Professor Ashfahani received a Skyline President's Grant to do a student project. He wants to put it on private property and reached out, former Culture Arts Advisory Committee member Debbie Van Wart and I had been attending art events up in Skyline College, trying to create a relationship with their art department. It's taken 4 years, but the professor got a grant of their money on private property where we might have to go back and revisit the ordinance that was done Councilwoman, back in your time, I don't know if council can dictate what a private entity puts on their wall. I don't know. That would be something for it. But in the case of Professor Ashfahani, it's a grant for his students. He's done them in San Bruno and in Daly City with the cities up there. And it would come back to us in January.
Okay, Madam Mayor, just to be clear here, if anything of any large scale is a mural, it does have to be approved by the city, and I would assume the city council. It's like any big billboard that goes up. So I want to be clear on that, whether it's public or private property, because it impacts the community. I have
It's a
no
good
problem
point.
with the plan as presented here, as long as we are staying within the current policy requirements.
My understanding, it would be very much like what happened with the skateboard park, which Culture Arts in a joint process with Park and Rec came back to City Council for the words that might set the theme of the artwork. And Amy would know. Amy, were you on the commission, the committee then?
I was.
So, I mean, council set the words that help describe what should be shown in the skateboard park mural, and then the artwork itself came back. And it went through quite a long process.
Okay, Madam Mayor, this is a plan that's being proposed. I'm just stating for the record here. I think we're getting off track on a lot of things, and we have a big important issue to do.
Of course, Gina, would you like to correct me any other ways tonight? I hear you.
Madam Mayor,
I've heard
I'm not
you.
trying to correct you.
Councilman
I'm trying to
Hollenberg,
stick on the
Councilman Hollenberg,
agenda.
go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm a little confused. Was the grant for art on private property or was it for art at the rec center, which is public property?
Private property.
So that would be not, so that's separate then from
It's separate
the,
from the rec center question.
okay, so that would be more for task 2, the public
Yes.
art project. Okay,
Task,
thank you.
yes.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, I do like task 2 to look at ideas for more public art, especially around downtown, more types of art mediums. In terms of the rec center mural, this, I'm on the subcommittee and this is a surprise to me. I had heard anything about this up until this report. I haven't seen any renderings, or, all the renderings.
Oh,
of
no, it's just an
the
idea.
building. No,
We do have the scope right here. I think everybody can see it, that it says introduce and prepare a concept for mural at the new recreation center, discuss concept with the recreation. Sorry, Mackenzie, you're moving it.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm just saying, in terms of all
Can you go up,
the renderings
Mackenzie?
we've seen of the building, none of them envisioned a mural being on the side of the wall. And I don't know if this is
Right.
even an indoor or an outdoor mural that's being presented here, but I think, in terms of the subcommittee, we're open to hearing ideas, but this, I think, is by no means part of the plan, at least not anything that is.
Yeah, the task is just to propose. We thought it would be joyful.
Yeah, so for
Thank you.
clarity, I mean, it says discuss concept with the recreation center subcommittee. If subcommittee agrees, present to the city council for review and
I see that.
approval. So this will come back.
Okay.
We're, I'm glad we're having this discussion now because I don't want to get ahead of the city council. And so this is the kind of launching point to just have this initial discussion. And I think as Councilmember Pappen said, it's a plan. Doesn't mean we're going to go out and implement it, but it's something that we can work towards and implement as we take the steps.
And
people agree.
Councilman, the mural, the location, the to be discussed, the location is within what I assume is going to be the fenced off area for the children in their area. It's on the Lansdale side
Right.
of it. It's right there on which wall it went to. It's been discussed at a couple of different culture arts meetings. I'm pretty sure I had brought it up. I had thought all along it was part of the fundraising program, but it can come back to you. And the plan is written in such a way. If you remember the tours that we did of other rec centers in their small young children area, they usually all had some kind of colorful art for the kids.
Yeah, well, we spent a lot of time, going over the designs and enhancements to the designs. I don't know if you remember last year when we made the windows larger and added more of the stone facade. But throughout that process, I don't think there was ever mentioned or suggested that there would be a mural within that play yard area. We saw a lot of renderings, but like I said, we're open to ideas and open to hearing what the committee is presenting. So thank you.
And I
That's all
would
that I
also
have.
say
Thank
that
you.
murals don't always take up an entire wall. Sometimes murals can be, one of my favorite is simply a dragonfly on the side of a building. It's not the entire building. It's not the entire wall. It actually is three-dimensional. So that's something for the two committees to be working on once the work plan is accepted. I do see a public member's hand raised. They're not identified. Call-in user 1. Vice Mayor, before we open it up to public comment, go ahead, Vice Mayor.
I'm fine with the work plan, but I don't know how we're going. I feel really uncomfortable with the $15,000 for something that is stating people that haven't even been approached. So could we take that out of the work plan?
The dollar amount or the whole proposal?
Well, the dollar amount, I mean,
Sure, we could put
I'm not-
TBD. I was just, like I said, that's
not
the
a-
dollar
not a
amount that
lot-
was in the work plan for the skate
I'm not
park.
I'm not a lion, but I'd be like looking at this meeting going, oh, we're giving.
Well,
And
and it was just a suggestion because they gave to the skate park. Who wouldn't want to give to little kids? But yeah, we can take that out. We can put,
Amy, we all
TBD.
want to give to everybody, but we have to approach this in a business-like manner. And I think that if we approve the work plan and it goes to other committees and they approve it and then it comes to us, I'm fine. But as far as looking at our budget and our finances, I don't think it's in our budget. So if we can
right, no,
take,
I understand that now. I did not understand that before.
Thank
So
you,
it could be rephrased. So funds pending fundraising activities.
Awesome.
And if I may, this is Mackenzie. There is no fiscal action whatsoever with approving this work plan. So those funds will not be allocated until and unless the more in-depth plan comes back to the city council.
Thank you, Director McKenzie.
Mayor, yeah, and that would require a budget amendment and obviously action by the city council.
You might get a philanthropic donor.
Through the chair, sorry to interrupt. I would recommend keeping that in just so that we know what the estimate is. You know, but we're by no means approving that tonight. I think it's just so that, you know, if this comes back a few months from now, you know, we're not surprised by the amount, you know, the estimate to work off of.
So
It's not
could a
an approval.
compromise to the two Vice Mayor and Councilman keep add the word approximately or estimated at 15,000
It
and
says
then
cost estimate.
remove the potential sources of funds.
Fine. It does say
Vice Mayor, are
cost
you okay
estimate.
with that?
yeah, that would
Okay.
be great. Thank you.
Okay. I mean, I see your point as a lion, I guess as a lion. Yeah, but I see your point. It's a good point. But I
It
do
says
know,
requested.
given
It
that I'm
doesn't say
sort of on the
from.
Millbrae Community Foundation Rec Center fundraising committee, that the discussion of artwork at the rec center is something that they are actively fundraising for. What that artwork might be, is again, comes back to city council.
Yeah, and just to be clear, so this says cost estimate. I think what might make sense is $0 to $15,000. $15,000 was pegged off of maybe a more elaborate mural that we have at the skate park, and funding sources TBD.
That sounds
We'll
great.
fix it.
Yeah.
I didn't
Millbrae
mean to
has never
suggest that
received
anyone
any-
had signed up to donate money. It says requested by, just like proposed. We'll reword it.
Okay. And then, you know, just like the plans that we approved talked about last week, having this in the culture arts work plan means that they can then be in a better position to apply for the San Mateo County Arts Commission grants, of which Millbrae, I do believe, has never received any grants, which should give us a better chance of getting funding. And they give grants out every year. And they've just put out a solicitation. So any other comments from council? Opening it up to public comment, call in user _1. Maybe the call in user, your hand is raised. If you don't have a comment, we'll just move on and close public comment. Or if you're having problems unmuting yourself, I show that you're still muted.
I think they have to do *9.
Star 9 is to raise hand. I think they just left the room.
Okay, all right. Closing, I don't see, oh, sorry, let me go back, quick check. Eduardo, do you see any? I see, well, call-in user 1
User-
still has their hand raised. Call-in user number 1, could you unmute yourself? Star 6 maybe,
There they go.
and if you could please give us your name. Please go ahead.
This is Marge.
Welcome,
Hello?
former Mayor Colapietro. We can hear you.
Okay, I just have to say I dialed in at 3 minutes to 7, and then I pressed 9 and whatever they told me to do to talk. And then you went so fast, I wanted to make a comment under public comments. And then also I'm going to want to make one when it comes up to the districting. So could I make a brief comment that I was going to make under public comment?
Certainly, please go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to call the attention to the city council and staff. As you well know, you're going through it, and our community goes through it with you, and you're having several meetings of importance to the community. And you know, the viewers like to have to be participating at the real life time. And there's sometimes meetings such as a 10 o'clock district meeting, I think it was. And of course, the beautiful annual tree lighting ceremonies that are not streamed live. And I'd like you to give some consideration to take this as being transparent, especially when we have such important meetings to do. And, you know, not try to cut things out streaming live, you know, for budget purposes, you know, prioritize it and, you know, think that the community is very interested and everything goes by so quickly. So I just want to call that to your attention and have some consideration that, you know, the community, you know, needs to have, I think, a little bit more exposure and transparency during the live time. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, former Mayor Colapietro.
And Mayor,
Okay.
Mayor, just Mayor, for the record, because we don't have the timer up, that was 2 minutes and 18 seconds, well within the 3-minute time window,
Okay.
just for the record.
Okay, thank you.
So do I
Okay.
hold on again
No,
now?
no, we'll call you back. You can raise your hand again later when we get to those agenda items. Thank you, former
Okay.
Mayor.
But note that I need to
Okay, we've
speak
got
on
you,
that.
former Mayor. Thank you. All right, closing public comment on agenda item number 1, bringing it back to council. This is an approval. If there's no further discussion, motion and second.
Motion to approve as amended.
Thank you, Councilwoman Pappen.
Second, Oliva.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Could you just be a little clear on the amendment, please?
The amendment is on, I don't know what page it is, but it's a screen that's up right now under cost estimate. It'll say $0 to $15,000. And Amy, did you catch the rest?
It was funding to TBD, funding
Funding to
sources
be-
to be determined.
To be determined.
Does that work for you, Councilman Fung?
Yeah, absolutely. Want to make sure
Thank
public.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands raised. If we could call the vote, please.
Councilmember Oliver,
Aye.
Councilmember Fung,
Aye.
Councilmember Pappen.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Oliva,
Aye.
Mayor Schneider.
Aye.
The city council adopts the 2022 Cultural Arts Advisory Committee Work Plan by the vote of 5-0 with amendments to the cost estimate to rewrite it to say TBD.
Thank you. Thank you, City Clerk, and congratulations, Chair Lauer, and to the MCAC members. I will see you on Friday at our monthly meeting with the professor. Thank you. Congratulations. Okay. Moving to agenda item number 3. This is a public hearing. Sorry, I've got to get back to my agenda. Public hearing. We have translation services in Chinese and Spanish available this evening for our CVRA public hearing, California Voter Right Act public hearing. Can our Chinese interpreter, Prudence Miller, and Ting Li, please give the public instructions on how to access the translation services in Chinese?
Sure thing. You can hear me okay?
You're coming in great.
Okay. 我们今晚提供普通话和西班牙语的同声翻译服务。您可以找到并点击屏幕底部的翻译地球按钮，并根据所需的翻译服务在英语、中文和西班牙语之间切换。我们要求任何需要口译服务的人说话缓慢而清晰，以便口译员能够有效地进行翻译。谢谢。
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you, Ms. Miller.
Sure.
Can our Spanish interpreter, Javier Vargas and Andrea Saudi, please give the public instruction on how to access the translation services in Spanish? Mr. Vargas.
Yes, definitely. Can you all hear me well?
You're coming in great.
Thanks so much. Muy buenas noches, gracias por acompañarnos en la reunión de hoy de la audiencia. Tenemos servicios de interpretación en español, también en chino mandarín. Para elegir esos servicios, por favor, les pedimos de favor que vayan a la parte inferior del Zoom. Van a ver un globo terráqueo. Ahí en el globo terráqueo, por favor, elijan el idioma de su preferencia para escuchar la traducción. Y también pueden poner en mudo el audio original para que no se distraigan con esa información. También les pedimos de favor que si quieren hacer algún comentario, que hablen claramente, pausadamente, para que el intérprete pueda traducir esto claramente. Muchas gracias por su atención.
Thank you. So tonight is this agenda item, transition to district-based elections for council members, public hearing number 3. This is an action item tonight. And City Manager, if you could please begin the presentation.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I will just hand it over to our consultant, Gabriela Morales from Redistricting Partners for a presentation.
Thank you so much, City Manager. Just a moment. All right, can you see my screen okay?
Gabriela, it's coming in full screen.
Perfect.
You're
You can
good.
see it?
Yep, you're
All
good.
right, awesome. Thank you so much. All right, well, welcome to the 2021-2022 districting presentation. My name is Gabriela Morales, and I am the redistricting manager, or one of the redistricting managers for the Redistricting Partners. We are working with the city to help with data and outreach. So thank you so much for coming and participating in tonight's council meeting. Your voice and your community's voice is so important to this process. So public input is pivotal to the process of districting, and I hope that you will all submit your own public testimony. We rely so much on the public to help draw the lines in a way that is fair for as many people as possible. So with that, let's move on. Things we will cover tonight is the traditional districting and redistricting principles, the Fair Maps Act and communities of interest, and some next steps. All right, so there are a number of criteria that have been used nationally and upheld by the courts. These are all in order. So basically the council has rules to follow when drafting maps. This list is in order of importance. They have to follow these traditional districting principles, which are there to prevent gerrymandering. The first one is relatively equal in size. So people, not citizens. Essentially, every person under the Constitution needs to have equal representation. So it's based on people, not so much status. So an example of this too would be that a baby should have just as much representation as a 67-year-old. They should be contiguous. Districts should not hop or jump. This means that you should be able to draw lines without lifting your pencil. Should keep districts compact in appearance and function. So an example of this would be, two houses may appear on a map right next to each other, but they might be separated by a freeway. So in appearance, they appear right next to each other, but in function, it might take a long time to get there because of the freeway separating it. They should maintain communities of interest. So we'll talk a lot about communities of interest tonight. And basically a community of interest is a neighborhood, community, or group of people who have common policy concerns and would benefit from being maintained in a single district. So COI, shortened term for community of interest, is defined by you, the local community members. And another way of understanding a community of interest is that it's simply a way for a community to tell its own story about what neighbors share in common, what makes it unique when compared to other surrounding communities. And why is a community of interest important? Keeping communities of interest together is an important principle in districting. It can be especially helpful to communities that have been traditionally left out of the process. Community members can define their communities by telling their own stories and describing their concerns to policymakers. Without this, those who may not have their best interest in mind will define the communities for them. And finally, the line should follow or can follow city, county, and local government lines. So lines such as water districts and fire districts or other local districts may also be used. So another way of thinking of communities of interest is bringing like people together for representation. Communities of interest are the building blocks of districts. A community of interest includes ethnic and language minorities and other groups. They should be subjective and open-ended to be as inclusive as possible. So because communities of interest are defined by you and other community members, you do not need census data to submit your own community of interest. And it's not always about the data or the math that goes behind it, but rather about personal stories when you're talking about your community of interest. Some examples of Voting Rights Act communities would be Latinos, Asians, and African Americans. The Voting Rights Act is a federal law that seeks to remedy racial disenfranchisement to protect these communities. And while communities of interest may include race, it cannot be the predominant factor in drawing district boundaries. So community of interest includes ethnic and language minorities and other groups, as mentioned before. Other community examples are people living near an industry, farming, higher education, manufacturing, senior citizens, students, downtown, urban, rural, agriculture, homeowners or renters, and so much more. These are just a few examples of how you can start thinking about your own community of interest. The way I like to think of it is if you can make the argument that your community is a community of interest, it likely is a community of interest. So 3 critical questions in defining your community. Communities can best be described by answering these 3 questions. The first question being, does the community have a shared culture, characteristics, or bond? Personal stories are so powerful. Find community members willing to share examples of things residents share in common and what makes your community unique. Imagine describing your community to someone who wants to move to your community. Does your neighborhood share certain celebrations or traditions? Are there important places where your community gathers? And what is the history of your community, of how your community came together? The second question being, is the community geographic in nature? And is the community able to be mapped? Whenever possible, include statistics to support your testimonies. You can include data on education levels, graduation rates, median household income, poverty levels, access to technology, home ownership rates, language isolation, voter registration rates, and so much more. This information can be gathered from the US Census Bureau, universities, local government reports, and other areas. But please, please, please consider using reliable sources such as the US Census Bureau to find data on income, education, language, race, ethnicity, and ancestry. And the third question being, what is the community's relationship with the jurisdiction being districted? So how is it affected by the policy decisions made by the elected officials? Often communities get involved in districting because they feel their issues have not been adequately addressed by their elected representatives. So highlighting community issues and personal stories and written narratives help to demonstrate the importance of having elected officials who understand and respond to community needs. So has your community come together to advocate for important services? And have you worked for more recognition or support of your community? So some other traditional redistricting principle would be starting in 2020, cities and counties doing redistricting have additional criteria they must follow under the California Fair Maps Act. So the process must be transparent when conducting redistricting, not using incumbent or candidate residents as a community of interest, and not drawing districts to advantage a political party. So this could be anything Republican, Democrat, any political party you can think of. And now some next steps. The council will determine whether there will be 4 or 5 city council seats. And the council should provide redistricting partners with information as to where neighborhoods or communities are that should remain whole and other criteria to prioritize as draft maps are created. And some upcoming hearings. As mentioned, this is the 3rd hearing. And the next one will be in January, where there will be a presentation of draft maps. January 25th, a review of the draft maps, and February 22nd, the final vote on maps. Although these are the days where the draft maps are being presented and reviewed, it's still important to submit your community of interest and all your ideas now up to the final vote on maps. And here is a citywide map. And this has all the data taken from the 2020 census and the citizen voting age population. So as you can see here, it is 52 Asian population and 11% Latino population. And then if you look at the citizen voting age population, the numbers are a little different, and that is because everybody considered in the census may not be eligible to vote, maybe because they're not 18 or for other reasons. And so that is why that number may appear a little differently. And again, I just want to encourage all of you to submit your testimony and be a part of this process. Your stories and your community's voices are so important to how this process moves forward. So thank you so much. That is all I have.
Can you explain that?
City Manager, did you have anything else to add?
Not at this time, Mayor.
Okay, opening it up to council comments. Go ahead, Councilwoman Pappen.
AIAN percentage you have up there? It's not, doesn't seem to be, is that defined anywhere on your?
AIAN, I'm sorry, I'm not seeing.
The last slide you have up?
Oh, on the bottom?
Yeah, no, well, you've got under the census numbers and citizen voting age population, both of which are 0. What? Just You have something up there. What does AIAN percentage mean?
You know, to be honest, I'm not sure what that stands for, but I can ask our partners and get
It's
back to you
American.
tonight on that.
American Indian, Alaskan Native, I believe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Oliver. Greatly appreciated. And then I'm not quite sure how on the census data we have 0% Black and then 1% Black voting population. Why is that not consistent? Just as a matter of record?
Mhm.
Probably rounding.
Yeah, that is interesting. You know, I will have to get back to you on that answer as well. I'll ask our line drawers and those who brought me this map to be sure, so I can give you a correct answer on that.
Well, I see down below it just,
Yes,
yeah, it looks like the
0.7.
rounding, because you had 0.07 as far as the population goes, and then the census numbers there. So
Voting age population.
yeah, you probably, thank you. Clearing that up here. And then I had another question here as far as neighborhoods go. In obtaining that information, so I'm in a specific neighborhood just because that's the way the homes were built, I think. Is someone giving you that neighborhood information? And then in addition to that, I think people might be interested in the school district boundaries for like the elementary schools, probably how that breaks down. That might be of interest to some parents out there. I don't know if we provide that information or how that works, but if anybody's drawing a map, they might want to see that. I think if the city manager can clarify here, I think we do have specific neighborhoods as identified. Do you have that information, and can that be offered to whomever is drawing a map?
Yes, Councilmember, that is correct. And we're using 3 maps just as a reference and resource point. One is the neighborhood boundary map. The other is our adopted land use plan and map. And the third are the school district boundary maps. So all of those 3 maps are up on our website and available to the public for review.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Pappen. Councilman Holober.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up briefly on that. I'm actually looking at the neighborhood maps that we have posted on the website, and I think many of these boundaries are extremely arbitrary. For example, it shows some neighborhoods that extend from 280 down to El Camino, and some that are cut off in areas that really should be, I think, considered part of the same neighborhood. So I would just caution, redistricting partners not to take that map to, not to accept it as gospel by any means. I think, as Councilwoman Pappen mentioned, I think these are oftentimes based on when neighborhoods are built. Sometimes the names are, I think, made up by realtors. No offense to the realtor on the council. But I would not necessarily defer completely to this map that we have of the neighborhood. I think it's far from perfect.
Just a little correction there, Councilmember Holober. We don't make up neighborhood names. We have our own areas that we use for searching.
And make up the acronyms, right? Like
no,
NOPA
we
and,
actually
SOMA and things like
we
that.
have our own areas and searches.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Holober. City Manager, I believe just before I open it up for public comment, the main goal for tonight's meeting, in addition to hearing from the public in general, is the discussion of whether to go to 5 districts or 4 districts and an elected mayor. So we are hopeful, the council is hopeful that when the public gives us comments that you can provide us some, where are you in this area, 5 districts versus 4 districts, because that does dictate how the maps will be drawn. So with that, if there are no other comments from council, we'll come back to council, opening up the public hearing. opening it up for public comment. I see the 2-minute clock is up. Hold on.
Mayor, could you just be, excuse me, but could we just be clear to the public that if the 4 districts would mean a mayor at large and the 5 districts would be a rotating mayor?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Yes, I kind of thought that was going to be part of the presentation, but hopefully staff can come back and after hearing from the public, also tell the public what this is going to mean if we go 4 districts with an elected mayor at large and or 5 districts.
Thank you.
With that, I'm sorry, Vice Mayor.
No, I just said thank you.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. All right, first up, we have former Mayor Colapietro. If you can unmute yourself. Councilman or former Mayor Colapietro. Okay, I just lost you. Okay, Ms. Colapietro, if you can hear us, I will not forget you. John, if you could unmute yourself and the clock will start. There we go.
Okay, I support that 5 district because
Yo apoyo los 5 distritos.
Hold on, John. Stop the clock, please. Eduardo, we need
thank
to
you.
mute the translation. Are we set there? You can start over, John. Is this John Chang?
Yeah, John Chang. Yeah, thank you.
Hi.
Yeah, yeah, thank you, Mayor and Councilman. Yeah, and yeah, I support that 5 districts because if
Yo apoyo los 5 distritos.
You won't have every time it won't, if 4 district it will comes tie and every time has to have another one to break the tie. So so I think 5 district is easier to do the business, and also 5 district if there's no large it's just by rotation. I think that will be fair because from the point of democracy, you know, is supposed to be decentralized, not one control everything. So so by rotation, that will become fair to every district. That's my point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chang. Just to make sure, if you're not quite up yet, make sure you're still muted so we don't have background noise. Ms. Colapietro, I see you're unmuted. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Colapietro. 2 minutes, clock is starting.
Thank you. I'm going to go rather quickly. I voted this afternoon to keep the 4-year terms for council members elected by the voters. Keep 1-year term for mayor using the current rotation system, not voted by mayor, not voted by the voters. Millbrae is a small city, and the election every 2 years would be expensive. It's not enough learning time. If someone is not reelected, no opportunity to be the mayor. It would be very stressful with the funding for campaigning and voting every 2 years, and it would be very difficult and stressful for other communities to keep up double the work when you have elections every 2 years, be disruptive to the businesses. We need a smooth transfer for whatever this is, and we need to think about having very, very clear and concise activities for voting. We don't usually get a very high percentage of voters. We don't know what it'll be like in each of the districts, and that's about what I have to say. and I hope I was in with the 3-minute warning.
You're doing great. You're just on time. Thank you, Ms. Colapietro.
You're
Nathan.
welcome. Now, how
Nathan,
do I unmute? How do I mute?
Ricardo, could you please explain the phone?
I can mute her. I muted.
Okay. Thank you. Nathan Chan, please unmute.
Yes, Nathan Chan here. Thanks again for your time to address you on this very important topic. I just want to reiterate that I think 4 districted council members plus an at-large mayor is my personal preference. I think it's important to have an elected official accountable to the whole city. I also think that there's no reason why the mayor shouldn't be a 4-year term like the rest of the council. This would create a situation where, you know, the mayor, there would be 2 sort of off-cycle districted council members compared to the mayor election, but that's no different than what we have to navigate at the federal level. While I have your attention, I wanted to turn to another aspect of this process that we discussed a little bit at the community workshop on Saturday. Based on my experience in the County District Lines Advisory Commission, as well as what seems to be happening at the state level right now, is that public comment before maps are drawn is a pretty hard thing to solicit from the public, because people aren't not necessarily used to thinking of their communities of interest in being able to describe them in words or even putting them on a map. But once they see a map and they see a line dividing their community, their neighborhood, they will certainly have a reaction. And so at the community workshop, we discussed the possibility of scheduling more meetings in January after draft maps have been presented. I highly, highly encourage the council to direct staff to confirm this. I think there's going to be a lot more public testimony at a later stage, and that's where we won't have any trouble finding people from the public commenting, and we need the time and meetings to accommodate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chan. City Manager, do you want to, I have no other hands raised. Do you want to comment? Because thankfully the city has a plan. I do see the Teresa's. I don't know if it's Sherry or Joe. So City Manager, do you want to answer Nathan or wait and come back at the end?
I'd prefer to wait until after public comment.
Very good. Very good. Sherry Teresi.
No, actually, it's Joe Teresi.
It's Joe. I'm looking at the photograph.
It's just
so there we go.
picture.
Welcome, Joe.
Just Sherry's picture. Yes. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. First, I'd like to just start by saying that overall, I'm not really in favor of this whole process, although I understand it's going to happen. And so I don't think we really need to be split into districts, but again, I understand that's going to happen. So that being said, I would be in favor of 5 equal election districts. And the reason for that is, one is, I think that if we had an at-large mayor, then that at-large mayor would necessarily live within one of the other 4 districts, and therefore one of the 4 districts would actually have 2 representatives. So I don't think that's fair. Also, one advantage that I do see to the idea of having election districts is that it's going to be easier for folks to campaign and spend less money. And I think that having someone have to run for mayor is going to sort of go counter to that, because they would have to campaign throughout the whole city. So that would lose some of the advantage of having these smaller districts, which I'm hoping is going to lessen the financial burden on candidates who are trying to run. So, and then lastly, I've said this before, but I'll say it again. I really think that I do agree with the idea of the rotating mayor, but I believe that it's very important that in the future that the protocol for how that mayor is selected needs to be formalized and codified, so that some of the confusion and psychodrama that happened over the last decade won't be repeated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Teresi. Margaret Ning, please unmute and go ahead.
Hello, Mayor and council members. Are you guys hearing me okay?
You're coming in great.
Thank you. I also echo Joe Teresi's comment that I'm not in favor of this redistrict process, but I understand that we have no choice but to move forward. If we have to decide tonight, my recommendation is to have 5 districts with a rotating mayor. The reason being so is that it's important that each elected member to rotate into mayor position that represents the entire city. This will continue to encourage each district council member to focus on making the best decision for the entire city rather than individual districts. So therefore, I support 5 districts with a rotating mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ning. City Clerk, I just have someone on the phone before
Tengo
we.
alguien en el teléfono.
There is someone on the phone. Before we open that up, City Clerk, could you please give instructions to anyone who might be watching this live, how they might be able to call in, the phone number that they can call in as they're watching this on cable or on their computers at home?
Absolutely. So the dial-in number is 1-699-900-9128. And the meeting ID is 876-3092-4892. If you want to use the raise hand feature and you're dialing in, please press *9.
And because you gave the passcode number fairly quickly, can they also find that on our website?
It is on
or
the
if you could give the number once more and make sure someone's got pen in hand that they can get that code.
Absolutely. The dial-in number 1-699-900-9128. And the meeting ID that you will need to enter is 876-3092-4892. And if you would like to raise your hand and you're dialing in, please press *9.
Thank you. Thank you, City Clerk. We do want to hear from you. And again, we have a decision to make tonight, but we do have a long process and the city manager will update us in a bit. I see iPhone number 3. If you could unmute yourself and please give us your name. I see a thumbs up. I don't see an unmuting yet on iPhone number 3.
There it
Do you
is.
see?
There we go.
Unmuted. This is Lou Sandrini. Do you hear me?
You're coming in great, Mr. Sandrini.
Well, I concur completely with the recommendations of others, and for the reasons they've given, that would go to 5 districts, not 4 and 1. I also agree with the comment that it's really unfortunate that we're having to do this. Everyone should know the only reason we're having to do this really is because the council and the city manager failed grossly when this question first came up by not addressing it with the concerned party administratively. Had they done that, there was a reasonable possibility that the subject would not have gone forward with legal implications, and we could have avoided that. And the districting is really a sad day for the city. It's going to leave a legacy of many problems with regard to how the districts will function. And again, I regret to say your council and your city manager has failed the city in not properly addressing this when it first came up. Thank you for nothing.
Thank you, Mr. Sandrini. Amy Lauer, if you could unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you so much. Here I am with wearing a new hat. I am in favor of an elected mayor, so the 4 and 1, mainly because putting on my business hat, I actually don't think that once you're elected, you should be able to rotate through without being accountable for performance. So what if in your rotation, you sort of let people down, you get to rotate into mayor without being elected. So my corollary to that is I also think that there should be campaign fundraising limits. I don't know exactly what those should be, but those should be so there's equitable access to campaigning and getting yourself known. As everyone has said, we're a small community. So I think it is possible to get out there, meet people, represent them. And so, yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lauer. Last call. Anybody wanting to give give public comment, please raise your hand or please alert us if you are on the phone. Okay, seeing no raised hands, going once, going twice, closing public comment. Thank you. Oh, hello? Okay, closing public comment, bringing it
Excuse
back
me,
to.
I'm sorry. Excuse me, Mayor. This is Jean Wong. I raised my hand, but I haven't been called.
Oh, Jean, I'm sorry. It's not showing up. Please go ahead, Ms. Wong.
Oh, okay, sorry. Good evening, Mayor Snyder and council members. I would like to see Millbrae retain the current city council 5 members and the annual mayoral rotation. It served the city well, and I think it will continue to do so. The process has allowed residents opportunities to assess the caliber and effectiveness of our elected officials, and has also provided elected officials opportunities to expand and improve their leadership skills when they do rotate to the position of mayor. A common argument that I hear for a 4-member council and an at-large mayor is that the council members don't always put the interests of the city as a priority. And therefore, it's important to elect the mayor to represent the whole city and not just the district. I, however, argue that there's little evidence to support this assumption. And I have confidence that any council member elected to Millbrae City Council would know that their responsibility is first to the city of Millbrae, regardless of the district they represent. I also hope council will take the opportunity to codify the mayoral rotation protocol so it becomes a part of Millbrae's city code, and the codification will ensure that the rotation process is managed smoothly and without disruption. Also, like Amy has mentioned, it'd be nice to see some sort of financial reform addressed by city council, and to address campaign limits to avoid special interest participation in our city elections. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wong. Okay, last call. Again, I don't see any hands raised. If anybody else sees a hands raised, please shout out to me. And I don't see everyone. I'm not on that mode. So with that, now again, closing public comment, bringing it back to City Council. City Manager, there was at least one set of questions for you. If you would like to start us off.
Yeah, certainly. I guess I'll start with the last part, which is 2 members of the public, or actually 3 members of the public, disagreed with this. And I'll just, for public information and for the record, the city was facing a lawsuit. So this is in response to a potential threat of a lawsuit and state law. And so this came to this city as a result of state law and abiding by state law. And then in terms of the number of people that have participated in public comment this evening, there was a total of 8. 6 of those members of the community have stated that they would like 5 districts with a rotating mayor, which is 75% of the 8, and 2, which is 25%, have indicated they would like 4 districts and an at-large mayor. With all of the information that we have out on our website and it's available to the public, we do have a survey that is out and it's been distributed to the community. So far, we have 80 people that have responded. And of those 80 people, 41.25% have indicated that they would like 5 city council districts with a rotating mayor. And 58.75%, or 47 people, have indicated that they prefer 4 city council districts with a elected at-large mayor. So in the survey of 80 people, the preference so far by 58, or almost 59%, 47 people, is 4 districts and an at-large mayor, with 41.25%, or 33 people, choosing the 5 city council districts and a rotating mayor. And then I think it was Nathan, who had indicated that once people see the district maps, based on his experience with the county redrawing districts, supervisory districts, that we'll get more participation. I think that's true. The first public hearing that we will present the maps based on redistricting partners work is January 11th. We will also have software available and up on our website the first week in January. And it's a great tool that people can be at home or have meetings with communities of interest, that people can use the software to draw maps, and that has demographic population information that you can actually move the lines and balance out populations with each of the districts. But Mayor, I guess to answer your final question or the communication you provided this evening, it is critical because we are running on a timeline that is, again, dictated to us by state law. We actually have 90 days to finalize the district maps. We were able, through our legal counsel, to work with the attorney that threatened to litigate this. We were able to get an extra month of time. So our ultimate deadline for adoption of districts is March 1st. We do have February 22nd, though. That's a normally scheduled city council meeting, second meeting in February, that we have slated for the council to actually take final action on this.
Thank you. And we don't really, campaign funding limits, I believe effective 2022, Millbrae will fall under the new spending donation limit set by the state of California. And I can only guess at them, but that is a good discussion for the future on that.
Yeah, Mayor, sorry about that. And that's a completely separate issue from what's facing the council this evening.
So bringing it back to City Council, City Attorney, do I need to close the public hearing before we go to council discussion, or do that at the end?
Oh, I'm sorry, I pressed the wrong button. I think it would be a good idea to close the public hearing.
Okay, close public hearing. We traditionally do not do that with a vote, or do you want me to do it with a vote?
I think that's fine.
Okay. Closing public
Any
hearing then.
objections from the council, right?
Okay, thank you. Bringing it back to council, I see Councilman Fung.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, I've talked to a number of the members of the public, and then there is a question from them, and I think it'll be valuable for our legal counsel to weigh in on that question. If there was a decision to have an at-large mayor, how would that elected official, how would the term limit on that, work with the current term limit ordinance that we do have put in place by our voter? If Joan can explain that to the public, would be nice.
Certainly. So we do have in our code, our Millbrae Municipal Code, term limits, and these term limits for council members were approved by the voters back in the late 90s. And the rule is that a council member can serve no more than 2 consecutive 4-year terms. The rule goes on to say that if a council member is appointed to fill the balance of a vacated council seat for less than a full term, that council person can still go on to serve 2 full elected 4-year council terms. If we have decide to have a separately elected mayor, that mayor would be considered a member of the council. And but if there is a desire or a determination to have that mayor serve a 2-year rather than a 4-year term, which is a matter that can be determined by this city council, the rule does not directly apply, because the rule that was developed by the city council years ago and presented to the voters really talks about 2 consecutive 4-year terms, does not talk about, did not conceive at that time of a member of the council serving 2-year terms. So we would be presented with a situation whether we really want to, nail it down and clarify it and go back to the voters, I would think that one could reasonably look at the law and say that the intention of the voters that approved this rule was to have an elected member of the council serve no more than 8 consecutive years. But, there is room to question, whether it would apply then to the mayor with a 2-year term, if that is the decision of the council. So that is an issue that we may need to clarify going forward. But as I say, I think initially we can assume that if we determine a 2-year term, that mayor should serve no more than 4 consecutive terms. I think that being elected consecutively to serve more than 8 years was not anticipated and intended by the voters based on the rule that's currently in effect, even though that rule wasn't drafted to address the situation.
So to further clarify that point, city attorney, first of all, it would be beneficial to have text ready for the public, number one. Number two, based on what you just explained, would it be fair to say, and I don't want to put words in your mouth because you're the lawyer in the room here, that any elected official should not serve more than 8 years in consecutive, whether you're in a council member or mayoral position? Would you say that's a fair assumption? Or would you say,
I think that was the intention of the voters. The nuance here is that the stated rule does account for someone who is appointed to serve an unexpired term. So that's the nuance. But I would say that I think the intention of the rule is for a person not to serve more than 8 years in consecutively elected positions on the council, if that makes some sense. Certainly clarification, the council may want to determine clarification. The council, I have heard talk that the council may want to consider with the public and its community the notion of term limits and whether the current rule is appropriate. So this may be a subject of broader discussion in the future.
Thank you, City Attorney.
Thank you, Councilman Fung. Council members? Other comments, other questions? Councilwoman Pappen. Councilman Holber, you had your hand up, you took it down, so called on Ms. Pappen.
I will concede to Councilmember Holber.
Go ahead, Ruben.
No, go ahead.
Councilwoman Pappen, it's in your court.
Okay, council statements are slightly confusing here. It made it sound like the mayor would run every 2 years as opposed to council members running every 4 years. Is that what you were suggesting?
I think that the question that came to me, Councilmember Pappen, was asking what might happen if you make a determination for a mayor with a 2-year term rather than a 4-year term. The language in the code talks about a 4-year term, and there is a matter of a decision of discretion in front of the council tonight as to whether the terms would be 2 years or 4 years.
So I'm still confused as to this 2 years. What's before the council, as I understand it, and what the public was presented with, is whether we divide up into 5 districts throughout the city and a rotating mayor. Given the second option, as I understand it, is that we divide the city up into 4 districts, and there is a city and a mayor at large.
At large.
All of which would have 4-year terms. Where's this 2 years coming up with?
Kim, do you want to explain that there is also the decision as to whether the terms for the city council members or for the mayor at large, if you should determine to have a mayor at large, should be 2 years or 4-year terms? That is an issue also before you.
I would like explanations on that. I don't see that as an issue. I see that as a change of the charter. So somebody want to clarify?
Kim,
You know, and I can.
Yeah, thank you.
My understanding is that that all council members, whether or not they're at large or assigned to a district, would have 4-year terms. I don't, there are other changes that might be necessary to go to 2-year terms.
All right, thank you for the clarification. But the mayor could be 2 or 4 years. Is that true?
I think it's a 4-year term.
All right, I stand corrected. Councilmember Pappen, you're absolutely right. So we only have 4, we're only talking about 4-year terms.
So just as for a matter of discussion, and I've not made up my mind here, I'm listening to what the public's preference is. And I think that this would mirror somewhat what exists in San Bruno now. If the decision was to have a at-large mayor, that person would serve a 4-year term. And in coordination with that, there would be 4 separate districts which would have council members. And then that other option would be kind of what exists now. We would have 5 districts and a rotating mayor. Just for clarification.
Is that to me?
I'm just clarifying for the record.
Yes,
If council
yes,
has
that-
any,
right.
Doesn't believe I presented that correctly, please let me know.
I think that was correct.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Hulliver.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the attorney here, but that's how I interpreted, the language that was in our term limit laws. To me, it sounds like a 2-year term is not really even on the table in terms of an option without changing that law. It's pretty clear 2 4-year terms. And regardless, though, I don't think, even if that were an option, I don't think that would be necessarily have to be determined tonight. I think in terms of the direction that the district partners need is whether to go from 4 districts or 5 districts. And the length of term or when certain seats are up, that would be determined later on. I guess nobody's really wants to talk, but right now, so I guess I'll just go for it. Nobody here is really happy that we're here at this time. I think district elections in a city like Millbrae does not make very much sense. I think we're far too small to have district elections. And I think most voters here in Millbrae would be supportive of the current at-large system versus the district election system. That being said, we've been advised by multiple attorneys to go this route to avoid potentially costly litigation. So I think we need to make the best of it. And in my opinion, going forward, the best way to do it would be to have 4 districts with the at-large mayor. I think that helps to enfranchise the voters more by allowing each voter to vote for 2 members of council instead of just 1. It also would provide for a position of somebody who has to look out for the city's best interest overall, not just their neighborhood or their district. It also would make each of the districts a little bit bigger, so each council member is accountable to more voters and has to oversee a larger cross-section of Millbrae and a more diverse area of Millbrae. So I think also it would give that mayor position a little bit more clout in terms of the various regional boards and regional committees. If it's somebody who's there for 4 years versus just 1 year. I know there may be some concerns about it, and I've been thinking about this in my head a little bit. One potential option, if there are concerns about concentration of power too much in one position, would potentially be we would have a rotating vice mayor, and perhaps some of the duties of the mayor could be transitioned to a vice mayor or to another member of the council, if that's a concern. But that's where I'm leaning at this point, open to hearing from other members of the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Holober. Question for attorneys going back to our existing ordinance. So if we went to 4 districts with a mayor, and we have, and I know we're not supposed to be considering current office holders, would someone who had been serving on council have to sit off 2 years before running for the mayor? How would that work? Could that work? Or is then, if we're a directly elected mayor, yes, they're part of city council, but it's its own standalone election. So I guess, how does that work with our existing ordinance?
That really shouldn't be part of this discussion, Mayor, if I could just give my opinion for a second, because it should not be about any one of us. And
well, it could be in the future. Could you I hear you. What if someone was a council member for 2 8-year terms and then chose to run for mayor, adding a third term? Could you do that under our existing thing because the mayor is now this separate entity?
I would say no. The mayor is going to be considered a member of the city council, whether separately elected or not. And our rule is very clear that as it states, even though it didn't anticipate this, the rule is very clear that elected members of the city council, which an at-large mayor would be, can only serve maximum of 2 elected consecutive terms.
Okay, so that's the highest set of rules, and everything else would fit underneath it. Thank you. Vice Mayor, go ahead.
yeah, and I'm sorry to voice that opinion. I just feel like I want to keep about the elections completely away from my decision making, and I'm hoping that the council does as well. And I totally concur, almost 100% with Councilmember Holober. You know, I've given this a lot of thought, and the pros and cons, and I've gotten an opportunity to speak with a lot of our residents, and I see the pros and the cons to both sides. But I think the key is that we are so small, and to break it into the least amount of segments that we have to, I think, is what weighs heavily on my decision. So the 4 with the mayor at large also gives our residents 2 votes, because they get to vote not only for their district, but also for their mayor. And I think that that's an important, that's 2 votes, and all they need is 1 more for something that they want to see get passed or lobby towards. I too am, you know, very saddened that we have to do this, because a 2.5 by 2.5 mile radius of a city that has to be broken up is just absolutely ridiculous. And I would like to restate that it had absolutely no decision-making or any actions by which this council acted upon to get us to this position. So for any argument or anybody that would like to take that offline, I will argue that and defend the 5 of us where we do not want to be here. So with that being said, I concur with Councilmember Holober that let's break it up into a smaller or larger pieces in a small city, and allow for our residents to have 2 votes during the election than just 1.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilwoman Pappen or Councilman Fung?
I'll chime in if nobody wants to.
Go ahead, Mr. Fung.
Thank you, Gina. So I've spoken to a lot of people about this. And I think one thing that I look at is the spirit of the law here and the spirit of CVRA. I mean, what issue is it trying to solve, and why do we have this legislation? It is to ensure that minority votes are not being diluted so that they can elect their own leaders within a certain district, so that, you know, they have much greater opportunity to achieve a better diversity in our elected body, which is ultimately our decision-making body for any jurisdiction. And so therefore, having each elected council member, assuming that we're able to achieve more diversity on our council by following the CDRA and doing district election, to have an opportunity for each council member to rotate into the mayoral position would also serve the purpose and the spirit of the CDRA. So that every council member from different background, right, even different ethnic background as well, to actually have an opportunity to serve as the leadership position within our city. And I think that is the spirit of it. So, and among many of the speakers who spoke before us, I also attended the Saturday meeting as well and spoke to practically every person who attended the meeting. Most people that I've spoken to have also preferred the 5 district with the rotational mayor. So that would be my recommendation moving forward here to ensure there is equity and also having opportunity for every council member to serve in their mayoral position. And so that at the same time, every council member will have an opportunity and continue to encourage every council member to look at issues that, that would benefit, the entire city and also, focus more on the benefit of the entire city. And I think so that's the benefit of having 5 district and a rotation mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Fung. Councilwoman Pappen.
Thank you. Again, this is a very tough decision in that everybody I've spoken to, and I think the vast majority of the community doesn't want to be in this position at all, despite the circumstances which we are currently in, and we're not by any choice of this council or the city manager. This has been brought to us. I find it difficult dividing the city up into any pieces as to how it would resolve alleged violations of the Voters' Rights Act. And again, these are alleged, nothing has been established, but we are doing so to avoid potential litigation in the future. And I wish more of the public were involved in this process. I am leaning towards, as was represented by Councilmember Fung here, I think giving people an opportunity to lead is important and really kind of gives some equity. These are communities of interest. We have several throughout our city, and as was explained during the presentation, they could be based on age, ethnicity. Somebody mentioned white wine drinkers versus red wine drinkers. I mean, there are so many different communities of interest here that we are trying to represent. And we want to encourage everybody to be a part of this process. I can tell you, every single member of this council, we campaign, we knock on doors, we talk to people throughout the city, and that is the best experience and the best education anyone could have and should have if you're running for office. So to kind of limit that to like one area, or, I mean, it's sad. We really want to get to know the public so that we can represent them, and the best way is having just at large, because we get to go everywhere and talk to everyone. And we must, I would hope that everyone still does that, no matter what the decision of this council is. So I think what we need to emphasize here too is the least amount of change for the public is that they're kind of used to 5 members at this point in time. and that everybody has an opportunity to lead or become the mayor if they can reach consensus with their colleagues as is currently established here. I think that's important. And this is to say too, if we make the decision right now to do 4 districts and a mayor or 5 districts and a rotating mayor, we can change that, or a future council can change that at a later date, as long as we maintain the distribution of the maps in an equitable manner. So I would lean, and it's kind of, I would lean more towards the 5 districts and a rotating mayor at this point in time. I do have one question for legal counsel though. If the decision were to go 4 districts and a mayor, would that not take place after the current council has rotated through the process? Or would it take place immediately? In other words, we have an existing rotation.
I'm going to let you answer that.
Yeah, so it's a combination of those things. So it's basically a transition. So you won't all be in districts until the 2nd election. And where the mayor falls is going to be up to the order of elections that you'll decide when you pick the order of elections, what districts go in.
So right now, we just finished a 3-cycle election. So 3 council members were up for election. And then the next cycle, it's 2 council members. So we would decide whether we rotate in the mayor at the next election or the following one with 3 council members. Is that what you're saying? Okay. And
Yes.
Exactly right.
okay, so I would recommend to this council that we are making more than the one decision. And if it were to go to 4 and a mayor at large, that happens when 3 council members are elected, so that we can finish the cycle and ease through this process. But I am leaning at this point in time to 5 districts and a rotating mayor.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Okay, so we've got a split right now.
If I may say one more thing.
Go ahead, Mr. Fung.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've also, throughout this process, I've also, looked at and studied some of the other jurisdictions who already gone to district election. Some of them gone to district election quite some time ago. And we've seen some phenomena happening after the district election being instigated in some of those jurisdictions where there's a lot of districting decisions, like certain district is up for certain grants or certain decisions, being made with regards to a certain development within a certain district. That particular district representative would have to weigh in first and have to sort of guide the rest of the elected body. And there's a lot of these sort of districting politics going on, and that's not necessarily helpful. So I think by having a rotational mayor would help eliminate some of that stuff and encouraging everybody to have an opportunity to represent the entire city, which I think overall would be a bit healthier moving forward here. So if that adds to the value of our discussion, Madam Mayor, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Fung. Okay, so it sounds like we're at 2-2. I have gone back and forth on this. It should come as no surprise that I think the protocol in choosing mayors has not been as nice or as open as it should be. So I support the public when they've said they'd like to get that handled in an ordinance. It's out of the hands of the existing council members that way, and that's much cleaner. I think Councilman Fung made some good points in terms of allowing everyone opportunity. I can tell you this is my one time as mayor, given the way the current protocols are, and it has been wonderful and it has been exhausting. And I don't know, I think I remember seeing Mayor Lee at the end saying, it's been a great year, but it's time to give somebody else an opportunity. It is more work on that. I think the most important thing that the mayor does is voting on some regional regional, pardon me, regional elections, but the mayor also assigns other council members to activities. And I think with my lofty 6 years now, I think Councilman Fung and I have served the fewest number of years. For certain committees, it takes a long time to gain knowledge base on that. So sometimes it's really great when we keep our council duties. More of these are regional things that the public doesn't necessarily pay attention to. But, you know, the mayor does get to assign these. And I guess in that case, I think it is better to have a rotating mayor and 5 districts. I do like the point that 4 districts would put more people in a district, given how small we are. But frankly, the only way I will support a 5-district map is if we change the way the mayor rotation has been handled in the last 20 years. So that's where I'm at. That looks like, unless someone has changed your mind, we have a 3-2 on this. I believe we need to make a formal motion if there is someone there to make a formal motion.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion for moving forward, have a 5-district and a rotational mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Fung. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councilwoman Pappen. Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, City Clerk, could you call the vote?
Councilmember Holliver,
Nay.
Councilmember Fung,
Aye.
Councilmember Pappen,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Oliva,
Nay.
Mayor Schneider.
Aye.
The City Council adopts a resolution to establish a district-based election system for City Council members with 5 districts and a City Council selected rotating mayor pursuant to Elections Code Section 10010 by a vote of 3-2.
Thank you all. Thank you, City Council. This is rough work. To Gabriela and to the public. Our timeline is very tight and it is dictated by law. Gabriela and Redistricting, I don't have your full company name. I'm sorry. Today's been a long day for me. They would like as many of your communities of interest turned into them so that they can take them into account as they draw the maps. I'm sure the city manager can do a better job on this, but I believe our next council meeting with a new mayor will be January 11th, and the maps have to be presented to the public 7 days. It's 7 days or 9 days in advance. City manager or Gabriela. 7 days in advance.
It has to be presented to the public 7 days in advance.
So that means that our redistricting map making company will not get a winter holiday. But if you could please get your communities of interest using the website. I did hear from several of you that you had a difficulty using the website. Feel free to contact Eduardo at 259-2414, and he can help you make sure that we're collecting the communities of interest information. And please try to do it before December 23rd so they can be taken account in the maps that we will be seeing on January 11 minus 7 days. Is that January 4th?
January 4th, Mayor, they'll be available.
January 4th. On that. Are there any other, thank you to the public for all of your comments. Thank you for being here tonight on a
Quick question, Madam Mayor.
Uh-huh.
After the district maps are drawn, and hopefully, we hope this doesn't ever happen, but if someone doesn't run from a district, what happens?
I think at least what's happened in the other cities that have gone to districts, they end up appointing. I think we're going to learn in the first couple of cycles how well or how poorly districting works. And right now, from everyone I spoke to at the League of California Cities Conference in September, cities that have been districting for a while, they end up having fewer candidates running. So
I would just add to that, it's either and our city attorney can correct me, but it's either the council would appoint or it just remains vacant until the next election.
Or you could call a special election.
You could call a special election later, but
We could pay for a special election, but that should be part of our ordinance when we put this together, that we decide whether there should be an appointment or a vacancy.
Excellent point, Vice Mayor.
And also at the same time, I'm sorry, and also at the same time, even if we were to choose to appoint somebody, what would be the criteria? That appointee would need to live within that district, and if someone were willing to be appointed, why wouldn't they throw their name in to run to begin with? Because if there's only one candidate, filed to run, they would automatically be elected without being in.
Right, which is what happened in Redwood City on the last election cycle. And I think happened in Menlo Park, but I could get it wrong.
Yeah, I don't think you can force anyone to run or put in an application for appointment, but it's just a thought here. I would think that we might be able to avoid any such circumstance if we actually develop some sort of a, what do they call it? That a lot of cities do, like an education forum for people, a citizens workshop.
A leadership academy.
A leadership academy.
And then also with the formation of this new ordinance that we're going to get into, the signatures that are required to submit your application, do they have to come from the district or do they come from the city? So all of that needs to be looked at.
And thoroughly explained. Yes.
I believe that is probably ruled by the election code and it would have to come from the district, but we'll clarify that. I wanted to be clear, I haven't looked at the rules on vacancy for a long time. But if we have 4-year terms, which we are continuing to have, and someone doesn't run, I don't think you can leave a council seat vacant for 4 years. I think that there would be either an appointment or a special election. I think the fear is, and I'll have to refresh my recollection with the law, that the county board of supervisors can step in and make an appointment if you just leave it vacant, if nothing happens.
But Joan, could we write in our ordinance that if in fact the district elections are not able to fill a position in that district, that the appointment could be, or the appointment could be from out of district? Does it say in Shakeman's lawsuit that we can't do that?
Kim, I'm going to look.
Yeah, the person who takes a district seat has to be from that district.
Yeah,
but by election, this is all about election. So if we write into our city ordinance, if in fact nobody runs, if there's council can appoint from outside the district.
I think redistricting partners would be the best to answer that question.
Perfect. So maybe we could, because all those details are going to be incredibly important.
I would think they'd have to live within the district.
My gut tells me they have to live within the district, but.
And isn't this legislated already under the government code? So it's a matter of researching general law of the state of California under the government code, I would think. So we should.
I think in order to maintain the Voters' Rights Act, we need to figure that out.
Right.
I guess Congress, you don't actually have to live in the district, so there are different rules.
Right.
And also,
Gina, that's what I was thinking. Congress, you don't have to live in the district to get that appointment.
That's true.
So.
And what's the residence requirement? I mean, what if someone wants to be appointed or elected in a certain district, but they came from a different district and promised to move in after they get elected? I think some of that.
I think you have to be registered to vote there at the time of filing.
Can I?
At the time that you file the papers, correct.
We have one more.
And through the remainder of your term.
Correct.
City Manager, I think you said that this is going, there's existing law. If our attorneys could look at this, I am trying to remember the workshop that I went to in Sacramento, but I believe, given that this will go into effect for the November 2022 election, that we have to get all our documents in order. No, I think, well, I could be wrong, but I thought this is going in 2022. And the documents have to be filed by April. Or am I getting the April for the June primaries confused?
I think you're getting April for June.
So we're getting August, probably August for the November election.
The
so
general
we've got a
rule is always 88 days before the election. So it's usually the second week in August.
Can I
is-
say the fun just keeps on coming?
And
for
Mayor,
that.
I'd say
That'll
that's
be
for
more work.
candidates, but for us as a city to get the districts to the register of voters, I believe we have a May deadline for that.
Okay, I knew there was a deadline
So there's
coming
two
up.
different
Yes.
deadlines that we're talking.
Okay.
Yes,
So,
for,
so we have a few more months after that, but I think everyone brought up really good points. Let's make sure our ordinance is crystal clear on that. It just saves hurt feelings all the way around that way. Okay, any other comments for tonight? To Javier, I've got to pull your names up. To our translators, thank you so much tonight. I know it is work. We are grateful for your help tonight. And with that, we are going to let you go home and we're going to move to our last agenda item. But let me make sure I recognize all of you. I just have to get to a different document. Thank you to Prudence Miller and Ting Lee, Javier Vargas, and Andrea Saudi. Thank you so much for your assistance tonight. And I'm sure we will see you back in 2022. Okay, with that, closing this agenda item and moving on to our last agenda item. This is consider directing staff to draft an urgency ordinance related to Senate Bill 9, which is the 4 units on a single family home ordinance. And I see some hands raised already, but staff is going to go ahead and give a report on this.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Again, Tom Williams, City Manager. So real quick, Senate Bill 9, SB 9 was signed by the governor on September 16th of this year and becomes effective January 1st of 2022. And basically the bill requires a proposed housing development containing 2 residential units within a single family zone to be considered a ministerial action. That means without any discretionary review or without any public hearing or due process on the action. And if the proposed housing development meets, if it meets certain requirements under the law. And SB 9 also requires that a local agency administratively approve urban lot splits. And urban lot splits will be defined here in a few minutes by law with our Community Development Director, Ms. Darcy Smith. But the urban lot splits in a single family residential zone, if it meets certain criteria, has a minimum lot size of 1,200 square feet, of which you can have 1 unit, or actually 2 units rather, on the urban lot split, but 1 unit per 1,200 square feet. But in both cases, the city may apply objective zoning standards, objective subdivision standards, and objective design standards. As you may recall, the City Council approved a contract with a planning consulting firm who is preparing an ordinance for SB 9. It will not be available for adoption or consideration of adoption until late spring or early summer. So with that, we did receive a request from a council member to discuss an urgency ordinance to help further, protect the city's interest in affordable housing and to clarify density when it comes to urban lot splits. So with that, I would like to introduce our Community Development Director, Ms. Darcy Smith, for an additional presentation. And then we would be happy to open it up for questions. This is if the council decides to take action, we have noticed this as an action item, and but also as information.
And City Manager, because this is an emergency ordinance, correct?
Well, it's so this is a discussion about moving, getting council's direction to come back with an urgency ordinance. So
okay,
just like other items, when we receive a request,
so it's a
from
simple
member,
majority vote.
No, an urgency ordinance would be a 4/5 vote.
Right, but we wouldn't be doing that until next Wednesday.
Well, it depends on the discussion and the direction of the council tonight. And so I will state, though, in discussions with Ms. Smith and inquiries that we have received, we've only received 1 inquiry so far. And, and I know time is of the essence, but as we discuss this, I understand that a couple of cities have already adopted urgency ordinance. There's information floating around, municipalities, and I'm sure Ms. Castman, our city attorney, could weigh in here as well, that already there's threats of lawsuits. So I think as we have this discussion this evening, there's certainly, more questions than answers. But if we do come back with an urgency ordinance, we also believe that we can, go back, study things and get information and also bring it back on January 11th and not, harm the city in terms of the timing right now. But we can address that as we get into further discussion with the city council.
Thank you, city
Through
manager.
the chair, is it possible that we would just be able to hold off on this whole thing until the next meeting? And we're over time here on 35 minutes. And it's not it's an emergency ordinance, but it's not an emergency. And if we could just take the material facts that other cities can bring to the table for the next meeting, maybe we have this discussion.
Well,
going
I
forward.
think Councilman Holaber asked for this, and with this it's not really a new system. It's a city manager having us live to our existing protocols. Mr. Holaber, do you have thoughts? I'm happy to spend time tonight and work through it.
Yeah, if we can move quickly on it tonight. I mean, SB 9 goes into effect January 1. The only meeting we have scheduled between now and then is the reorganization meeting. I don't think we'll want to be discussing this then. So I would appreciate if we can give staff direction
Councilman
whether or
Holaber,
not to move forward at this time.
we don't have to make this decision for this emergency ordinance till January 11th.
Well,
No, the
except people
SB
can
9 goes
begin
into
filing
effect
I'm
January.
sorry, Ruben.
But
My
we can
apologies.
we can still file this.
We could, we would be missing out on basically a 10-day window.
A 10-day window, and I'm concerned about the 10-day window. So I think we're going to go ahead. Staff, go ahead with your presentation.
Okay, give me a second. Can you see the PowerPoint?
Right. Now you're coming in great.
Okay, great. Thank you, Madam Mayor, honorable council members. My name is Darcy Smith, the City of Millbrae Community Development Director. I'll be making this presentation, which again, for the audience, is more of a study session format to consider directing staff to draft an urgency ordinance related to SB 9. The urgency ordinance has not been drafted, so we're still looking for policy feedback. If we're directed to prepare that urgency ordinance and return at a future meeting for review and action. But quick background, I just have a few slides. We may have some new audience members to SB 9, as it's affectionately called. It was signed by Governor Newsom and will be effective January 1st, 2022, and essentially allows, as the city manager mentioned, for creation of up to 4 new dwelling units on a single family parcel. The property does have to be zoned single family, and I'll show a graphic that shows what this looks like in a minute. And there are extensive specified standards and conditions in state law that I won't recite, but I included the complete statute as an attachment staff report. You can access it online because there are standard baseline conditions. One of the most relevant ones I'll just point out is that the property cannot have been renter occupied in the last 3 years. The city has the ability to regulate the process and the manner of development permitted within limits provided by that state law by local ordinance. So as city manager mentioned, we are moving forward with our local ordinance. It's just not quite ready yet in full form. So quickly, what can be built on these single family zone lots being subdivided? And I'll show a graphic in a minute that shows that in more detail, but property owners can build 2 homes on each of 2 new lots. That's a total of 4 units, assuming minimum lot sizes are met. And if there's existing units, new homes can be added to, and I'll show what that looks like, up to a maximum of 4 potential units. Jurisdictions may choose to prohibit more units. Those are the accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, and junior accessory dwelling units, or JADUs. And that is something that's up to the local jurisdiction that could be enacted, that I'll touch on later under the policy considerations. Homes may be subject to objective rules, objective standards, as long as they don't preclude 2 800-square-foot units. So this is a neat little graphic of what it looks like. And I realize this is a lot to look at, a lot of text here, but essentially it just shows you what you can build on different lot configurations, such as vacant lots, lots with single family homes, lots with non-conforming units, or even a lot that already has a single family home and an ADU. And essentially, if you look at the bottom row, it's essentially up to about 4 units, but there are just a lot of caveats. And as this is new legislation, all the local jurisdictions are still combing through it. But I thought this was a helpful graphic that kind of shows in a nutshell what can be proposed. So local policy considerations. Well, there's a lot. And to be honest, there's probably pages and pages that we'll ultimately want to bring back to you.
Hey, Darcy,
yeah.
I hate to butt in, but somehow Councilmember Pappen got disconnected. And so she's
no.
logging back in. Can we just take a quick pause, Mayor?
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
And good. I wanted you to go back to that graphic so I can absorb it.
I think she's back in.
Thank you, City Clerk. Welcome back, Councilwoman Pappen. We waited for you. Go ahead, Ms. Smith.
Thank you. Okay, so I was just wrapping up this slide that shows a nice graphic, and happy to come back to it later. But again, one of the major policy considerations that the city could consider is just, would you consider limiting the number of units as authorized by state statute? And that largely would limit it and not allow accessory dwelling units or JADUs, which you'll see here kind of represented. So there's some key local policy considerations, and I mentioned there's a huge list. It goes on, and because this is brand new law, cities and our attorneys are still working through lists of what I would consider the local policy considerations. And ultimately, our plan is to bring it back for community input through a community meeting and a joint City Council Planning Commission study session, which is the forum that we typically take policy items to you at and get feedback. But the short list, which was prepared by city staff and our legal counsel for this purposes of the urgency ordinance, is abbreviated. And the number one thing that our attorneys said we should examine in a timely manner was whether we want to limit the number of units on each parcel. So local agencies under state law are not required to allow accessory dwelling units or the junior ADUs on parcels that utilize both the urban lot split, again, as defined state law, and the 2-unit development provision. So that's something for consideration. But again, absent a local law, a local ordinance, state law would prevail, and it does not have that restriction. Another thing to consider is affordability requirements. This is something that other cities have considered, and there's nothing in SB 9 as it appears interpreted now, limiting the imposition of affordability requirements. However, as you know, having just adopted inclusionary requirements, the city usually provides a detailed analysis around that. But what staff and our attorneys would proffer as a starting point for consideration would be that every one out of 2 units created pursuant to SB 9 would be deed restricted for 55 years to occupancy by low income households. 55 years is a standard deed restriction term, and occupancy by low income household is what we would recommend here. But the council may consider other affordability levels. So some lesser policy considerations just in terms of the magnitude of it. And these sort of best practices that even absent an urgency ordinance, we think are a good idea and we would enact administratively, is some sort of checks and balances. So state law has a lot of requirements, again, for what would qualify to utilize and build under this provision. And one of the most important one, as I mentioned, is around occupancy of the unit for the last 3 years by the property owner. And so jurisdictions are looking at requiring an owner occupancy affidavit form with the applications. So the owner would certify under penalty of perjury that they've lived there. And that's, again, sort of an important checks and balance. And the other thing would be a deed restriction on the opposite end, stating that the applicant intends to reside in one of the units that was created for 3 years. And again, that's enacting state law, but it would be that checks and balances in place. And last, a restricted covenant to provide for prohibition on non-residential use of any unit developed or constructed through the 2-unit development, and including a prohibition against renting or leasing the units of short-term residential rentals. Other policy considerations, last slide, would be a provision to prohibit no further subdivision of the parcels created by SB 9. And another thing would be setbacks. So there's a huge list, again, pages of potential objective development standards that the city will consider in our larger ordinance. But this was sort of a quick one that I thought we could toss out for consideration because state law is clear that cities cannot require more than 4-foot required rear yard side setbacks. But without a local ordinance, they're 0. So I thought, well, maybe we should look at just setting the maximum under state law because setbacks do provide an important privacy and privacy buffer to adjacent property owners and light and air to the new units. Last, we've had many conversations in the past about replacement housing provisions. So I just wanted to point out that one thing to think about in the urgency ordinance would again be a checks and balances, reiterating that state law requires compliance with replacement housing provisions, which is a lot of text, and I didn't want to include it here, but you can take a look at it real quick if you're interested, and that if any existing dwelling unit is proposed to be demolished as part of this SB 9 proposal, that again, they require compliance with that. So that's the end of my short list. And again, I just want to emphasize, we'll, as part of the official or formal ordinance, have a lot more to talk to you about in this area. There's a lot of things the city can consider through our objective development standards that we want to come back to you about. But this is sort of what we thought might present the greatest concern to in an urgency ordinance, which would meet the state criteria to be necessary for the immediate preservation of public peace, health, and safety. That's the requirements under the government code. And another reminder is an urgency ordinance does require 4 affirmative votes to be effective. So it's another thing that we'd like to get your feedback on tonight. So that concludes my staff report, and happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. I see at least one member of the public on comment. Council, any questions before opening it for public comment?
I have one question, Madam Mayor, if I may.
Please go ahead.
So on page 2 of the staff report, this question is for, I guess, either the legal counsel or Darcy. It says, these SB 9, essentially conforms to projects that are conformed to objective zoning, subdivision, and design review standards shall be approved ministerially and are not subject to CEQA review, and they are or they are not required to pay the city impact fees.
Darcy Smith, Community Development Director, they are required to pay development impact fees and all other permit fees for the project.
Right, but they're not subject to CEQA reviews.
Correct.
I see. And therefore, no public hearing at all whatsoever, meaning if someone would just come back and say, I'm in R1 zone, there's currently, on a 8,000 square foot lot with an 800 square foot house, they can come in with an application, tear it down, and build, say, a 2-unit building, so long as they fit within the objective standards, whatever the objective standard that we do currently have. Then they would not even require noticing, hearing at all whatsoever, and they'll be approved by the staff.
Correct. That's correct.
Just want to make sure the public understands that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fund. Other council members? If not, I got a couple of quick questions. Ms. Smith, in your slides, you said that a property that has been rented for more than 3 years wouldn't qualify. What would and then what happens if there's a house that's been sitting vacant for 3 years or 2 years? The house next door to me has been vacant for over 2 years now, so I'm just curious.
Wow. Well, I knew you would have a lot of questions tonight that I wasn't quite ready to.
Don't worry, hang on to that one. Hang on to that one. I think we should look at vacant properties because I think there's always some that are in, a family member has passed on, so it's in the legal system, but we have vacant homes. The other one, then you talked about a home office. I know that a good friend of mine 2 houses down ran her business out of her office. She's now moved, but that home office exists. If they wanted to use SB 9, would they then have to give up their home office?
No, a home occupation as allowed under the zoning code would be permitted.
Okay.
But a dramatic change to, let's say, a restaurant or a completely non-residential use, an
Okay.
industrial use or a restaurant, something, a yoga studio that's no one's living there, that would be prohibited.
Okay.
And there's other provisions in our zoning code that would kind of stop that, but that's just something to consider. Again,
And
checks and balances.
the last two, in the staff report, you have a section of language we might want to consider on allowing affordable housing for 55 years. That sounds good to me, given that most of the new housing laws the state has enacted are actually hurting affordable units, not creating more affordable units. Is that doable? I know it's in the staff report and it sounded good.
I'll defer to the city attorney on that. We've been doing a lot of research on that too. But maybe Ms. Castman has an answer on that.
Yeah, so you're asking, is it?
Could we actually, so a one house with or without an existing ADU decides to subdivide and create 4 units, and 2 of those units would have to be affordable, the same way we're holding all of the other apartment developers to that 55-year rule. I would imagine in time that becomes really hard to administer. But if you think it's doable, I think it's something that could go into an emergency ordinance.
Do I think you have the authority to consider it? Now, you know, I think you have the authority to consider it.
Okay.
Is what,
now, my last question, I thought SB 9 did not allow the demolition of properties in order to build new properties. So I got a little confused on that last piece there, the last bullet on your last slide.
There's some carve outs there. There's just a little bit of a carve out. It's not much, but I think it could happen.
Yeah, I already think we're demolishing too many perfectly good homes because people have enough money to do that. And from an environmental perspective, all building materials have something called embodied energy. There's energy through the entire supply chain of that material, plus sun that created wood. So I'm very disappointed when we keep allowing more demolitions instead of a reasonable remodel. So those are my questions. Council, any other questions? If not, I'm going to open it up to the public. Mr. Dunham, welcome back to Millbrae.
Good evening, Council. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak again. It's nice to see you all. I wanted to, just by way of introduction, I'm a lead with Peninsula for Everyone. We've support affordable housing and sustainability on the peninsula, and we're big supporters of SB 9 as a means for building more housing in neighborhoods that are otherwise very expensive to buy or rent in. As you might have seen, the median home price in Millbrae has now exceeded $2 million for a single family home, which is extraordinarily expensive. So SB 9 will allow more affordable housing types to be built in neighborhoods that are otherwise $2 million homes. Want to just comment on some of the legal issues. I think doing this as an urgency ordinance is actually pretty legally fraught. You need to make, if you were to do that, you need to make declarations about immediately preserving public health and safety. It is not clear that the lack of an affordability requirement on a duplex is an immediate threat to public health and safety. And I think if I were a homeowner who wanted to use this bill and was frustrated at whatever policy decisions you make, I would very much seek counsel for whether or not that justification holds up under the Brown Act. You'd be much better off doing this through regular order, which is basically what every other city, save one in San Mateo County, is doing. Very few cities are doing this urgency ordinance. Second, I strongly urge you not to make a BMR requirement. Portola Valley looked at that, and their legal counsel suggests that would be considered confiscatory and subject to legal dispute. If you want to put any kind of requirement, make it a fee. But if you make it a BMR requirement, that's potentially opening up you to lawsuits. And I suggest you talk to other cities about it, in large part because it will render these developments infeasible, and you will likely be sued by homeowners or housing advocates. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mr. Dunham. Kelsey Baines. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, good evening, Council. My name is Kelsey Baines. Like Mike, I am with Peninsula for Everyone, and we supported this legislation, and we're proud to see it pass because duplexes and small multifamily units make neighborhoods more inclusive. In my own personal experience, when I was young, my parents got divorced, and a duplex allowed my mom to have a house that she could afford to buy and give us stability when she was the sole earner for our household. And I will also share that I live in a multi-generational household right now, and something that we have considered but would currently be illegal and would be legalized under SB 9 would be to simply extend the wall behind me, put a kitchen that on the other side of this wall is another kitchen, and it could create 2 units without any demolition or any addition to the outside of the house. So it could look exactly the same on the outside, house exactly the same number of people, but do so in a more comfortable manner that gives people more privacy. So I think that the deed restriction, although I do believe it's well-intentioned, could really harm families in your community who want housing units that are going to meet needs throughout their lifespan, because our housing needs change as we get older, as people have children. So we want to give families the flexibility to have housing that meets their needs later in life. And I think I'll leave it at that. Mike handled the more technical comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Baines. I don't see any other hands raised, so doing a last call. Nathan. Mr. Chan, please go ahead.
Yes. Thanks so much for this opportunity to talk before you again about this important matter. I wanted to sort of talk to the City Council about sort of comparing and contrasting how the City Council reacted to state ADU legislation compared to SB 9. I think the city took its time to develop an ADU ordinance. I think most people on the council think it could have, and the public thought it should have arrived sooner. But, for quite a while, Millbrae was operating under state law default, and it didn't feel like the sky fell in terms of neighborhoods being disrupted in any huge way. So I suspect that something similar will happen with SB 9 if the implementation, if an urgency ordinance is not passed and the planning department and the council takes the time to craft something deliberately that addresses all the nuances that are required. One other thing I would say too is with respect to the deed restriction, is that a deed restriction without any mechanism to fund the affordable housing, whether municipal, county, or state, is basically dead on arrival. It won't produce any affordable units. And so we'll have the effect of just not producing any units whatsoever. It might be better to apply in lieu fee instead. And I want to remind the council that when you considered the affordable housing fees earlier this year, it stopped at 5 units. And so, does it make sense to apply it down to 2 units? If it doesn't make sense there, then a deed restriction should be applied to 2 units as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chan. Rayanne, and if you could please give us your full name.
Hello, my name is Ryan Mudashemi. I am just commenting to echo what I heard from Kelsey Baines's and Nathan Chan's comments. I would say that I've heard of a lot of other cities kind of thinking about like, oh, let's see what like these cities try and see how what controversy, et cetera, they get embroiled in potentially with kind of passage of an urgency ordinance early on. And I would just suggest maybe it might be a good idea to not try and be the canary in the coal mine about trying to implement something quickly. I think what Mr. Chen said about having a deliberative process is is a good idea for this, and it's something that, as I understand, was implemented with ADUs. And I think that, you know, like this law as it was crafted is for moderate upzoning, and I doubt that you're going to see like a flurry of like SB 9 applications that come in super quickly in between now and when you can get an ordinance in next year. So I would suggest a more deliberative, seasoned and considerate approach going into next year. And I would just add by saying that I think that the provision of housing is one of the most important things that a city council should do, and it should be possible to build more housing in all neighborhoods in Millbrae. So I think that trying to craft a law that an ordinance that allows for more housing is going to be important for us to solve or address the housing crisis and all the inequities that it has brought. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Jean Wong. Go ahead, Ms. Wong.
Oh, thank you. As homeowner, I'm hoping that council would take whatever action necessary to minimize the impact of SB 9 on our single housing zone neighborhoods. I think, as I understand SB 9, it potentially can create problems that we're not fully anticipated, that we're fully prepared to handle. Congestion, parking, infrastructure. I think I understand the intent of SB 9 and what it's trying to achieve, but on the other hand, I would like to make sure that our single family neighborhoods are not destroyed in any way, and that we retain the environment that we all bought our homes in, and hope that they will stay that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wong. Okay, public, last call for any comments. Going, Jordan Grimes, go ahead, Mr. or Ms.
Yes,
Grimes.
thank you so
Mr.
much.
Grimes.
Good evening, Council, Honorable Mayor. My name is Jordan Grimes. I'm a lead member of Peninsula for Everyone, as well as the political director of the Peninsula Young Democrats. My comments are my own tonight, though. I just want to very quickly chime in and second the points made by Mike, Nathan, and Kelsey. I want to specifically highlight the points around applying a fee to SB 9 units rather than an inclusionary percentage. A fee would allow the city to capture money to use to purchase property and then work with nonprofit developers to build an affordable housing project somewhere in the city. I think that has a much greater chance of actually producing affordable housing than the inclusionary percentage. With the inclusionary percentage, duplexes are already going to be very expensive to build. I think that's going to, I think an inclusionary percentage would deter that. I think a fee would actually help the city recoup more affordable housing in the long run. Nonprofit developers can use land and tax credits via the fee to build more affordable housing. So I would say that probably makes more sense. And that's really it. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. Okay, last call. Going once, going twice. Closing public comment, bringing it back to council. If we can go back, there we go, full screen. It is lovely to have the housing advocates show up to our council meetings, but I will reiterate what one councilwoman said 2 weeks ago. We have 488 housing units at the BART station on hold because of high-speed rail, and not one housing entity stood up for us. And our Assemblyman Mullen had his annual meeting. So going back to that one, we welcome you to come and help stand with us for housing we have already approved that's on a transit corridor. And it would be nice if you weren't just doing one-size-fit-all laws at the state level, but that you work with us on local housing. Next topic, Assemblyman Mullen had a meeting with elected officials, local elected officials last week. And he actually showed an interest to learn where SB 330, I talked about how SB 330 has actually hurt affordable housing, hurt our ability, unlike having a developer agreement where with the help of Councilman Holliber, we got 100 housing units of affordability, or 25%. And now on a project, we're getting 15%. And really of them, only 11 new units, since they're tearing down 8 existing units. So these housing laws have impacts on local government that are not intended. And the Assembly would like to hear from us, from the city, on those. So with that,
Mayor, real quick,
Council,
the SB 330 is not 15%, it's 5%.
5%.
Oh, 5%. Well,
Not
there we
15%.
go. There's a problem with 330. So that's just my update, because we haven't had a chance to do an update. Councilman Holliber, go ahead. Where would you like us to go?
Yeah, well, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Manager, for placing this on the agenda tonight. Nice to hear from all the public speakers. And I think, as Community Development Director Smith mentioned, we are working on a permanent ordinance. There are a number of issues that need to be worked out, and it will take quite a bit of time. One of the realities with SB 9 is, it basically eliminates decades of careful community-based planning and zoning just with the stroke of the governor's pen. And it will take us a little bit of time to unpack that and what that means for Millbrae, what our needs are going to be. I think it's very clear right now, affordable housing is a huge need in Millbrae. And I think one of the biggest flaws with SB 9 is that it does not guarantee that a single affordable unit will be built. One of the speakers mentioned home ownership now is over $2 million, the average housing price in Millbrae. And that's, I think, before speculators had the ability to put up to 4 units on one lot. So I can only imagine what it's going to be once this goes into effect. The few, more modest homes in Millbrae, whatever 3-bedroom, ranch homes that are still out there, will be gone fairly soon if SB 9 goes into effect as written. So I think this urgency ordinance is incredibly important. It will help us bide some time and make sure that the biggest needs in Millbrae are being met, and that is not market rate housing. There's a lot of market rate housing in the pipeline right now, but it's affordable below market rate housing. And fees and other in lieu fees, that's something that we can look at perhaps with the permanent ordinance. But I think it's important to get this on books, and also to make sure that, to be clear, that ADUs and JADUs will not be permitted under SB 9 lot split, because the way I see that is potentially there could be 8 units on one, even at one fairly small parcel, if the ADUs and JADUs are permitted as well. So I think that's incredibly important to keep in the urgency ordinance, and I would encourage the council to support this and for staff to move on this and get it approved before January 1st. Thank you.
Thank
and
you,
I'm available
Councilman.
for a special meeting anytime. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Holliber.
I didn't quite hear the end of Councilmember Holliber's comments. Sorry.
I said I'm
Mhm.
available for a special meeting at any time between now and January 1st to get this done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Other comments, council? This is to give direction to staff on what to do. We've heard direction from Councilman Holliber.
I would concur with Councilmember Holliber. I think this definitely needs to have another meeting. So I will support this tonight, Councilmember Holliber, but I will support going forward with this, but I really want to get the details nailed in and see if we can't not rush into it like the way SB 9 was written, rushed and not thought through. So I'm going to support it, but I definitely believe that this needs more than 20 minutes at 9:30 to get through.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilwoman Pappen, and then City Manager. I see you, Tom.
The city manager can go before me.
Okay, City Manager.
Well, I'll let the council go. I just some clarity there on support, but need more time. We have 2 different kind of directions here, but I'll address that after the council's done with their discussion.
Okay, Councilwoman Pappen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, for the housing advocates, as the mayor clearly stated, there are 488 units that we need your support on, 25 or 20% affordable, and we're not getting it, which is disturbing when we think about this current legislation here. And we have been, SB 330 has negatively impacted us when we're trying to do affordable units, as the mayor noted. One project they took us to court on, and we only came out with 5% affordable when we would prefer 15 or more percent. So we are doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing here, which is increasing density and really fighting for affordable units. And that was the idea about our ADU legislation. We are not sidestepping any of this, but to say you can come in and just offer a fee for affordability and build somewhere else, we're only 3.2 square miles. We don't have land to put up affordable housing projects anywhere. We did already, right across the street from that pancake house, all affordable. That was in the redevelopment days or whatever the funding was, but we don't have that anymore. So we're trying to make this happen here. What's disturbing, and I think that SB 9 is problematic, is as to the affordability aspect of it, the not subject to CEQA. I mean, that is really, as Councilmember Holliver noted, a lot of planning goes into cities, and it's not that we are not trying to avoid our housing requirements. We're trying to make them happen in the appropriate manner. But I do believe setbacks are important. I do believe ADUs are important. And then just to say, throw that out the window because one size fits all on SB 9, I don't think that's appropriate here. We are trying to do exactly what is needed here, and that is the affordability elements of housing, not just any housing, because it's just going to keep going up and up and up. The prices for homes, whether you put 2, 4, 6, 8 on a lot, they're still going to be millions of dollars, and that doesn't help anyone here. So,
well, those are going to escalate the prices, Councilmember Pappen.
Yeah, escalate it more so.
Yes,
yeah, I agree. I agree. So I think this is important for our city because, again, not every city is the same here. We will continue to build housing. We encourage all the housing advocates that are here tonight, help us in the approved projects. We have hundreds of units. But I think what was presented here is important, and I would support this measure. I am concerned as to what Mr. Chan said here, that we carefully pursue this, but I think we need to pursue this in order to make sure this SB 9 is implemented, but in a fashion that does not negatively impact the property owners here, and we can continue to try to provide affordable units. So is that helpful, I hope, for staff?
Thank you, Councilwoman. It sounds like there are at least 3. Councilman Fung, where are you? And then we can move this forward.
First of all, I want to thank Councilmember Holliver for bringing this forward. It's an extremely important discussion. I mean, SB 9 is a very troubling legislation. You know, it works in some jurisdiction, but it doesn't work in all of them. And so, you know, I'd like to say one thing is that, you know, it is important for us to continue, and as we have been, as some of the other council members have said previously, to encourage more affordable units coming into our city. I think that's, you know, foregone conclusion that we need to continue to do that. And I think we've been doing a good job at it. But if we're serious about making housing more affordable here in Millbrae, we need to make sure that these affordable units are going to those who needed it the most. So I think, you know, we need to, at some point sooner rather than later, knowing that we have a lot of these units are coming into our city, you know, TOD projects, both TOD projects have a sizable amount of affordable units are coming in, as well as some of the other new ones that are being proposed. That's already on the horizon, as Councilmember Pappen already noted. We need to come up with some kind of ordinance and policies to prioritize and distribute these affordable units, in a way that is equitable and fair. Now, see, here's the thing: if we enact some sort of an ordinance that mandates affordability in this single-family home district, how do we enforce these affordable unit goes to the people who deserve it? I think that's my next question. Legal?
You're barking up private property rights, Mr. Council Member.
Well, I mean, we're talking about. I mean, how do we know that? Let's say, I mean, we're talking about an ordinance that would ensure that new units coming up to be affordable units. But how do we enforce and know that they in fact goes to those who needed it? I guess enforcement is the question.
I think Darcy can help you on that. It is very well regulated that it is enforced. So Darcy, can you explain?
Yeah, Darcy Smith, Community Development Director. So the city has the ability to be very aggressive with enforcement of it. But you asked sort of, I think, a two-part question. Number one is, how do we make sure these units go to the right people? Well, the city, through our recently enacted affordable housing program resolution, you might remember that. I told you that was like the nuts and bolts in the heart of the affordable housing provisions, 15 pages of a resolution that really has the process laid out for how these units, these inclusionary units are regulated by the city. For larger projects, as you know, there's an affordability agreement that's recorded. For smaller projects, if it's just one unit on a single family property, it's a deed restriction that runs with the land, as I proffered, for 55 years, which is the standard term. And then the city has the ability to do audits, to require annual reports if it's a rental unit, for example, and to audit and confirm the income. If it's an ownership unit, that selection is done. We've done it traditionally for our ownership units through a lottery process that the city runs and is involved with. For apartment complexes, there's a process to select qualified tenants, and many cities do a lottery process or other mechanism that's very transparent and open to select them. And then the ongoing enforcement to confirm that a qualified tenant is in there. That's usually done every year. The incomes are checked and verified. And then also some cities just do spot checking to show up and, confirm occupancy and make sure, the occupant resides on the premises as they promised. And we have the ability to be pretty aggressive with enforcement. So cities keep an eye on these things and catch offenders and do just like we do with code enforcement, take them through the process to enforce our provisions. Does that mean we catch everyone? No, with code enforcement, it's a process and it takes a lot of time, but we are very aggressive in this area because it's not something that's fair to cheat on, right? It's just not fair. You're taking what should be a really important public good and you're manipulating or otherwise compromising the system.
Right. So with this emergency ordinance as proposed here, I just want to be clear, Councilmember Holliver, you're saying that for the second unit being created as part of the SB 9, it needs to be deed restricted affordable. Is that what your proposal is?
That's a conceptual idea. I mean, I will say there's a very compelling interest here to maybe re-examine the fees. Those were just before you and adopted in July, but they only, as one of the members of the audience, require what we call the in lieu or fractional fee for projects that are between 4 and 9 units. And it was at 5, and I think it was Councilmember Holber said, "Oh, let's drop it down to 4." We made that change. But it's at 4. There are cities that do drop it down to 1 and even do it for single family additions. So I think it's San Carlos, if you want to look at their fee schedule, they require it as low as single family additions per square footage basis. But these were brand new fees, right? So we looked at sort of setting it in the middle of what other peer cities do. So we set it at, they're required for 5 to 9 units. So we can certainly look at that. We would need to do a fiscal analysis though to come up with those. I'm good at math, but I don't crank out those numbers when they come to in lieu fees. We'd have to hire a financial firm to analyze those and prepare them. But you might remember they were pretty high for the fractional fees. They were around $200,000. So we'd be looking at something around that range, maybe a little bit lower. I don't know.
Sorry, can I just chime in? The language that's here before you was not provided by me, it was from staff. There was a proposal that I saw from another organization, and I think what was written that was for every SB9 project would be required to have at least 1 unit that's deed restricted affordable. So if they go from 1 to 2, then that second unit would be deed restricted. If they go 1 to 3, it would still be 1. If they go 1 to 4, it would still be 1. So I mean, I'm fairly flexible with this. I think it's important to have that covenant at this time. I think maybe as we go forward with the permanent ordinance, we can look at fees as opposed to the restriction.
Thank you, Councilman. Mr. Fung,
Yeah, I just want to make one more point. Sorry. I'm just trying to think, you know, I understand the intention of your proposal, Councilmember Holliber, but I just want to make sure that we got all the bases covered and you know, all the nuance to study, because I don't want to create unintended consequences with this. And we need to be extremely careful here, because I'm just thinking, for example, if there's a scenario where someone want to move their parents in by creating an additional unit under SB9 with this ordinance of mandating certain amount of affordability requirement, precluding that, you know, extended family members, so on and so forth, that sort of scenario, rather than, I mean, you know, it's important that we create affordable housing. You know, I'm well beyond convinced to do so, but I just want to make sure that this is not going to create some unintended consequences.
In that situation, Councilman Fung, isn't that an ADU though? Couldn't you just do that under existing ADU?
So I guess there are many ways to skin a cat, if you will, but you know, for example, siblings, for example, if my brother-in-law wants to move into a 2-unit building, they may not necessarily qualify for those income justification. I'm just trying to think out loud here. I mean, what I'm trying to say is we need a little bit more study on this. And you know, I don't want to rush into this because I can just imagine a lot of nuances.
I think, Councilmember, that would probably be under the ADU ordinance to either be an ADU or a JADU. I think with SB9, the concern is more, you know, lot splits and you know, putting 4 units on one parcel. So I don't think that would be a concern. I think you know, we can monitor the situation until the permanent ordinance is in place. But I think this, as written, or you know, with amendments to this, would help prevent speculators and flippers and people from just coming in and driving up the price of real estate in Millbrae to make a buck, and really prioritize affordability.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Pappen. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Fung.
I just want one more question for the council. On the SB9, can we not limit the second unit created as part of this in terms of its size?
So we can limit size as long as we don't prevent the construction of units that are 800 square foot each. And that's something we'll definitely look at in the regular ordinance, but we just didn't have enough time to dig into that because there's a lot of options. I mean,
yeah.
Even tonight, you know, we have several items we really need feedback on, unless you just want to stick with the urgency ordinance to like one item. But it would be nice to know what, if you want to bring back an urgency ordinance, which of the, you know, 8 items that we proffered in the staff report you want in the urgency ordinance, because that's a one-time thing up for action. in the regular ordinance, believe me, we're going to have probably a 3-hour study session on this item. So we're gear up for that. And we also will have, as I mentioned, a community workshop. And that's where these myriad of options can be walked through for your more detailed feedback.
So when you say 800, you mean you cannot create something, you cannot mandate something created less than 800?
Correct. Yeah. The state law is a little interesting in that it says like cities can do this, but your laws can't limit this. And so one of those is our laws can't limit the size below 800 square feet. And there's a lot of that. I mentioned the setbacks, right? You can have setbacks, but no more than 4 feet. So again, there's a lot of these development standards that we've got to analyze state law and then interpretations of state law before we come back to you.
Councilman Fung, all set?
Not quite, but I'll yield the time.
Okay. Well, I think what I just heard Director Smith say is she has a slide. I think it's 2 pages with those 8 items. If you can pull them up while you're doing that, Councilwoman Pappen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And for the record, doesn't an emergency ordinance only last like 6 months?
45 days unless extended.
Yeah, 45 days, and then has to be extended with more justification. You have to keep looking at it, and it can't last more than a year.
Okay.
Certainly, as you've heard from Darcy, we'll be bringing you a permanent ordinance before that.
Yeah, and I need to emphasize the significance of this emergency ordinance in that Millbrae is an intermodal center here. And the pressure from the housing advocates when the BART development went in actually destroyed the access to that station, so that now the quality of life for people taking buses into that station, if you're in a large bus, you have to walk 6 minutes each way. That's 15 minutes a day. That's an hour of the quality of life for people. So when you talk about dividing up units and no parking and no that, I mean, I get that, you know, a lot of people not using cars and stuff but that can impact the station area so negatively that nobody can even get there. So there are planning considerations not to, you know, prohibit housing or additional housing or affordable housing. There are just planning considerations that need to be evaluated very, very carefully for a small city like ours, because even the smallest impact can throw the balance of the flow of traffic or the access to transportation, all kinds of things here. I do think that this emergency ordinance is important because should someone come in and start just splitting up properties in such a way that a whole neighborhood is thrown off, it's really going to disrupt people's access or flow throughout the city here. So the fact that the CEQA is not, these projects are not subject to CEQA, and the impact that they may have at this point, I do think an emergency ordinance for the 45 days is important, and really further evaluation as we move forward here, because it's just, we have to look at what the impacts are going to be. And that's what concerns me the most moving forward.
Thank you, Councilwoman. It sounds to me like, and I agree with everything everyone has said. So there's at least 4 of us to go forward. Staff, what do you need from us? We can make this an action, but I'm not exactly sure how to phrase the motion on that. But Darcy, tell us what you need.
Yeah.
Well, Mayor, if I could step in here. I mean, I'm unclear that there's 4, you know, for this. What I heard is there is 4 for this, but the timing, right? So we'd like some clarity, you know, on the timing.
And there may be 5. I just didn't hear Councilman Fung give strong direction one way or the other.
I think there are also I also think there's some legal questions. You know, some members of the public brought that up this evening. We know we've been following some of the other urgency ordinances, at least one, although there's been no litigation filed. There are some, you know, rumbling that it will be filed. So if the direction from the council is, hey, bring it back at a special meeting or the meeting next Tuesday, we very much have to limit this to, the affordability covenant at this point in time. And I think clarification on the lot splits, that's what I would recommend. If we want to do more than that, then I would suggest give us a little bit more time and direct us to bring the urgency ordinance back for adoption on January 11th. I think that that time between, January 2nd and the city council meeting on January 11th isn't going to, put us in harm's way, so to speak. So just it depends on how much the council is seeking in this urgency ordinance. And so that's really what we would need clarification on. And so Darcy, I think you had some more information, or unless I covered it.
Yeah. So can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah. So these are like the top 2 policy considerations, as the city manager mentioned, that you could consider in the urgency ordinance that would sort of be the things that when we talk to our attorneys about, the things to, be cognizant of under local control that we may want to consider. The other items that I presented, as city manager said, some of these we can do just through administrative processes, the affidavits, the deed restrictions. Again, I said those are checks and balances for state law. So we'll research it more, but we believe that administratively through our application process, we can require these, and we'll probably be further along in the process. For example, the deed restriction is done after approval. So that's a later thing. And the restricted covenants, again, those implement state law. So if we want to stick to these 2 topics, I think it would just be nice to get consent, to get feedback from the council to confirm this is what you would want in the urgency ordinance to bring back to you.
So I'm going to do a quick roll call. Councilman Holliber, where are you?
I'd be supportive of that.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. Councilman Fung?
I'm not sure at this point.
Okay. That's fine. Councilwoman Pappen?
I would be supportive of this.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor?
Does this not allow us to add anything at another meeting, or is this like, if we stick with these, it's only these?
My understanding is that these 3 bullet points would be drafted into the emergency ordinance. The other issues would come back in the normal process with the contract that we've already approved.
Well, the emergency ordinance is going to come back either way. But
right, but the only the bullet points currently being shown right now would be in the emergency ordinance. All of the other things are still up for discussion, but we'll come back through the process that we approved that $60,000 consultant contract.
Or they can be done administratively by city staff.
Thank you.
Correct.
Or done administratively.
After a meeting? After another meeting? We could have another meeting and then add administrative changes?
I don't want to speak for Ms. Smith, but I believe what she said is if the urgency ordinance is approved, staff would be able to do the rest, the other items offline without necessarily needing the council's approval.
Correct. Most of them administratively. I think the big thing here for the council to be aware of, and Darcy, correct me if I'm wrong, are the objective design standards that would need to be have to be adopted by the city council in an ordinance.
Yeah, and those are just going to take a lot more work.
Yeah.
They're, robust development standards. So we're not ready for those yet.
But these kind of land use, obviously the affordability covenant.
But if we come back to them, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time with this vote. If we come back to a meeting in January, would that be ample enough time to present the other bullet points that we could address? Darcy?
Well, we need direction now. I mean, the thing is, so there's not much here, right? There's this prohibition on further subdivision. I think that's in SB 9. So again, it's just reiterating it, but the setbacks are one thing that you might want to consider, whether you want to have the 4-foot required rear and side yard setbacks.
Yeah, I want to consider more than this.
So Vice Mayor, do you mean in the emergency ordinance?
Yeah, I
Or
mean, I
coming
don't
back
like-
in January?
This is for 45 days. I'll consider this. I would go with this. I would give this direction.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I will do the same. So you've got 4. You've got 4. Did we want to make a vote tonight so that we don't have to bring this back next week?
No, I want to bring it back, please.
So we would be having this at the front end of the reorganization,
No,
which is virtual.
Yeah.
No?
You need to have an ordinance brought back to you. An emergency ordinance, as was commented upon, does need to show justification for the urgency. I mean,
Okay, so we have to come
you can't
back.
just direct, put these in an ordinance.
Okay,
It needs to be a policy considered action, and you need to see the document.
okay. Vice Mayor?
Yes.
Because you'll be mayor in less than a week. I will be in the middle of the ocean from the 17th to the 27th. So just in terms of having an additional meeting. I'll be back the morning of the 27th, but I will be at sea, literally.
Well, what I'd like to do, if it's, then my recommendation would be that we work hard. We need to notify this 24 hours in advance, but bring it back next Tuesday. So then that way, with holidays and everything else, we don't get into trying to get a quorum together.
Is Darcy,
That would be my recommendation.
can she I mean, that's a lot to ask.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think.
That's why if we limit it, to those 3 items, I mean, we have it already written now. We just, and there is a finding that I think we can make relative to the urgency of this that our Assistant City Attorney Mike Conran has researched. So yeah, if we limit it to that, I think we can do it. But any more than that, as Darcy was mentioning, that list of 11 or 12 things, and I think it will require further legal research. Then we would have to bring that back, I think, on the 11th. But if we stick to those 3 items or 4 items with, including the setback.
Is it at all possible to
think we can-
consider a special meeting toward the end of next week? I mean, Tuesday is coming pretty quickly. I would think that you would want this thing published and available to the public by Friday, when you generally issue documents for your regular meetings on Tuesday. I'm just wondering,
If it helps, I can do Thursday, the 16th, but as of 11 a.m. the next day, no.
I can
So
do
it-
Thursday.
I could do Wednesday or Thursday.
I like that idea. Thank you, Joan.
Yeah, I'm just saying, this is not kind of off the shelf.
We're just
drafting.
we're rushing everything.
Yeah.
This is
Well,
going to
we
be
will
given
thank the
thought.
governor for that one.
We need.
It is a rush.
Yeah, we need to justify each of the bullets, not just one. And so I think we need to give some thought to this.
Gina, are you available Thursday? Yes, she is. So we could do that, guys. I'm sorry. but
Councilman
yes.
Fung, are you
What time-
available Thursday?
I think Wednesday would be better for me if it's in the evening.
We could do any time, actually, as long as we notice it.
Yeah, in terms of schedule, my Wednesday evening is better than Thursday.
I don't have my calendar pulled up.
We do it during the day as well.
Yeah, we could do it during the day, you guys.
That's
Thursday
true.
During the day.
Eduardo, perhaps you can pull together, check with Ms. Smith and pull together a doodle poll and we can go that way. And
And
rather than
remember,
taking our time now.
Darcy needs time, so Wednesday might be pushing her. Thursday or Friday might be better for her.
Yeah, and not to speak for Darcy, but she's going to be on vacation. So I will, be guiding the council, through this. So that's why I just really direction on efficiency and effectiveness and what is it that we're trying to protect here. And then as we then, move forward with our regular ordinance, in late spring, early summer, then we'll have it. But I think we can stick to the 4 items. We already have it written. We just, need to make the findings, put it in the format, And
And the fourth
you-
item is the setbacks.
yes,
Okay.
if that was,
Councilman Ho-
that's the direction I think.
Councilman
Where-
Oliver, thank you for bringing it forward. It just feels a little bit pushed, but I'm willing to work hard through the week to iron it out.
Didn't have a lot of time for this, but thank you.
I understand.
For, being
Okay.
receptive to it.
So we don't need a vote tonight. We do need the formal, for,
formal-
it's got to
I
be
just think-
4 of us.
Clear direction.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. And staff, you're set? You've got the direction?
I think we have,
I think so. I mean, my preference is always a motion and a second and a vote, but if everyone else feels comfortable, I'm good with it.
I'm happy to do motion second
Great
vote,
consensus.
if that's going to give you, and do that. Mr.
Okay.
Holliver, would you make a motion?
Sure. Motion to direct staff to prepare an urgency ordinance on SB 9. You have to say what,
No, I would just say the 4 bullet points that we've identified.
correct, yeah. With the 4 bullet points identified by council and staff.
Excellent. Thank you. Is there a second?
Oliva,
Thank you, Vice Mayor. No further discussion. Call the vote.
Councilmember Oliver,
Aye.
Councilmember Fung,
I would abstain from this one.
Councilmember Pappen,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Oliva,
yes.
Mayor Schneider.
Yes.
The city council approves to direct staff to prepare an urgency ordinance related to SB 9 by a vote of 4-0-1 with Councilmember Fung abstaining.
Thank you. Thank you, City Clerk. So the following up action is the city clerk will send out a doodle poll for us with a schedule that works with the city manager. Darcy, have a lovely vacation.
Mayor, if I may, I think
please go ahead.
Thursday is what we, was it Thursday?
But a
that the
particular
council-
time on Thursday, I don't have my calendar up in front of me and something is telling me I have something on Thursday. So I
Sometimes
just
it
have
takes
to
me more
pull it
time
up.
to get everybody's calendar together than it does to write the ordinance. So I just,
Yeah,
so Thursday, if we can actually,
Okay.
if the council agrees that that's the date, then we can find a time.
Okay.
that would,
during
that
the
would
day.
certainly give staff a little more time to draft this. And
Okay.
I think we should have it out to the public for transparency so people can read it.
Yeah.
You know,
Very-
before it's before the council.
Very good. And then in closing, thanks, everyone. Thank you for all of the people that are still here. Our last council meeting of, well, no, it won't be. Our reorganization is next Tuesday, I believe at 7 o'clock. We now do not have a special council meeting prior to that. I hope you will all join us for the reorganization. A new mayor will step up and Annie will take charge on Thursday. So with that, everybody have a great weekend. Go get your booster shots if you can, and see you next week. And closing at 10:12. Thank you all for a very long
Night.
night.
Thank you, everyone.